I'm Jake. I'm 38, married, 2 kids. Sam's 9, Lucy's 7, and I used to believe in second chances, even for family. Especially for family. I grew up with that mindset drilled into me. Family sticks together no matter what. That's what my dad always said, usually right after ignoring something cruel my older brother just did or brushing off a snide comment from my mom with a tight smile. I used to think maybe I was just sensitive. Maybe I read into things too much. Maybe it was just my imagination that the spotlight always seemed to shine on everyone but me. But you know what's worse than realizing you were never the favorite? Realizing your kids inherited that same invisible status, and watching it happen in real time while everyone else pretends it's normal. It started slow, these things always do. Like that first winter scratch in your throat that doesn't quite go away. You feel it, but you shrug it off. Too small to make a fuss over. That's how it was with my parents and my kids. A missed birthday here, a forgotten school recital there. Little things. Things you tell yourself aren't worth bringing up because it'll just cause drama, and God forbid anyone ruin the group chat harmony. I'm the youngest of 3. My brother Mark is 41, successful dentist, lives 20 minutes from our parents with his wife and their twins. My sister, Rachel, is 36, an Instagram mom of 3 with a curated feed and a chaotic reality no one's allowed to talk about. I live a bit farther out, an hour drive, but I've always made the effort. We show up. Birthdays, holidays, anniversaries, cookouts. You name it, we're there. My wife, Emily, is quieter, observant. She sees things I try not to. Did you notice Lucy was the only one who didn't get a cupcake? She asked once after Rachel's youngest birthday party. I'd missed it. Thought Lucy just didn't want one. Or the time Sam was so excited to show Grandpa his science fair trophy, and my dad barely looked up from the football game before saying, "That's nice, buddy. Go put it in the other room." I laughed it off. Told Sam Grandpa was just distracted. I kept patching over the little moments like drywall over water damage, until the wall finally buckled. December was always chaotic. Our family does a big New Year's Eve bash, my mom's idea, because Christmas is too crowded and everyone's always too busy. That party has been tradition since before I had kids. It's the kind where everyone's dressed up, the kitchen is overflowing, and the champagne flows like a Pinterest dream. My parents go all out. There's music, catering, matching napkins, and speeches. Always speeches. Someone says something about the year behind us, and someone else toasts to a brighter future. This year, we showed up around 6. Emily in a dark green dress. Lucy had sparkly shoes she picked out weeks ago, and Sam wore the bow tie he hated because Grandpa liked it last year. I brought a bottle of wine I knew my dad liked and a few gifts for my nieces and nephews. The living room was already packed when we arrived. Mark's kids were playing with a drone, Rachel's boys had taken over the den, and my mom greeted us with a distracted, "Oh hey, come in," as she rearranged a centerpiece. It was the same kind of welcome you give a coworker you didn't expect to see. Not hostile, just lukewarm. She didn't hug the kids, didn't comment on Lucy's dress or Sam's tie, just told us to make ourselves at home, and walked off before Emily could even take off her coat. I felt it then, something was off. But it was New Year's. I didn't want to overthink it. We mingled, made small talk. I helped Dad carry in a tray from the garage and tried to talk about football, but he kept checking his watch. Later, I saw Rachel pull Mom aside and whisper something, both of them glancing our way. That itch came back, the one in my throat, the one I thought I'd outgrown. Around 9:30, Mom tapped a fork to her glass and called for everyone to gather in the living room. Okay, everyone, just a quick moment," she chirped. "We have a little surprise for the grandkids who made us extra proud this year." I stood near the back with Emily and the kids, smiling, expecting some generic praise or maybe even a little something for everyone. That's how it always was. But then she pulled out a box. A sleek silver box with small wrapped presents inside. And she started calling names. To Ellie for getting straight A's. Applause. To Mason for learning to swim. Applause. To Grace and Caleb for helping their mommy with the new baby. More claps. Rachel beamed, phone out, filming. To Tyler for joining the soccer league. Another gift handed off. The room was warm with smiles, laughter, proud gasps. And then the box was closed. Lid snapped shut. Applause ended. That was it. No mention of Sam. No mention of Lucy. Not a word. Sam blinked fast, eyes searching. Lucy tugged on my sleeve. Daddy, did Grandma forget us? Emily reached for my hand. Her grip was steel. I swallowed and said, maybe she's saving ours for midnight. But I knew better. Everyone laughed it off. So cute, someone said. What a fun idea, someone else chimed in. Mark's wife handed out napkins for the cake. I stood there frozen, like my own presence was a joke I hadn't caught the punchline of yet. Emily didn't say a word. She just knelt down, fixed Lucy's headband, and hugged her. I followed her lead, wrapped my arms around Sam, and said nothing. No confrontation. No scene. Just a silent exit. We left before midnight. No fanfare. No goodbye. Just slipped out the door with the weight of silence in our chests. The next morning, I woke up early. Made pancakes for the kids, let them sleep in, tucked their gifts from us under their pillows. Emily sat beside me on the couch with her coffee, staring out the window. Neither of us said anything for a long time. At 9:12 a.m., I picked up my phone. No text from family. No "where'd you go?" or "Happy New Year." I opened the group chat. Me, Mark, Rachel, Mom, Dad, and Emily. Typed slowly. Deleted. Typed again. Then I sent it. Hope you enjoyed the celebration. We won't be attending another. And I turned off notifications. That should have been it. But when you set a boundary in a family that feeds off control, they don't let it go that easy. What followed was a spiral of manipulation, guilt-tripping, and gaslighting I didn't see coming. Not like this. The fallout didn't hit right away. That's the thing with families like mine. Everything simmers just beneath the surface. No one ever says what they really mean. They just send passive-aggressive texts, talk behind your back, or worse, pretend nothing happened at all. The group chat went silent after my message. For about a week. No one responded. Not even a thumbs up. No follow-up from Mom. No check-in from Mark. Not even a snide comment from Rachel, which was unusual in itself. I half expected my dad to call, say something dismissive like, "Don't be dramatic," but nothing came. And in that silence, I started to wonder, had they already decided I didn't matter? Had they already written us off? Emily didn't say much about it. She let me process. She gave me space. But I could tell it was eating at her too. She started keeping her phone face down, muting notifications, sighing a little longer when one of the kids asked, "Are we going to Grandma's house soon?" I didn't know what to tell them. I just said, "Not this week," and tried to change the subject. Then the texts started trickling in. Not from my parents, but from the outer orbit, my Aunt Janice, who always played peacekeeper. "Hey honey, just wanted to say I'm sorry about what happened on New Year's. Your mom didn't mean anything by it." That was her version of an olive branch. No ownership. Just a soft brushstroke of "let's move on." I didn't respond. Then Rachel posted a photo on Instagram. It was her kids opening presents at my parents' house. The caption read, "Late Christmas with Grandma and Grandpa. Thankful for a family that shows up." I stared at that post for a long time. I wasn't tagged. Emily wasn't tagged. Sam and Lucy weren't in the background. It was like we'd been erased. That was when I felt it, something deep in my chest. Not just hurt. Not just disappointment. Something colder. Something heavier. A kind of grief, maybe. The realization that I'd been making excuses for people who didn't think twice about excluding my kids. I showed the post to Emily. She looked at it for a second, then just said, "She wants you to react. Don't give her that." I nodded, but it still burned. Then came my mom's text. It was a Saturday morning, a couple weeks into January. Sam had just come home from a basketball game, and Lucy was showing off a drawing she made for her teacher. I was making lunch when my phone buzzed. "Mom, hey sweetheart. I hope you're all doing well. We've been thinking of the kids a lot. Any chance they'd want to come to Mason's birthday party next weekend? Just the kids. No mention of me. No apology. No explanation. Just a casual invitation like nothing happened." I stared at the message. Read it 3 times. Emily leaned over my shoulder. "Are you serious?" I didn't reply. I walked outside, phone in hand, and just stood in the cold air for a while. The next day, Mark texted. "Mark, look, I know you're upset, but you kinda overreacted, man. The gifts weren't a big deal. Mom just did something spontaneous. It wasn't meant to exclude anyone." I could feel my ears getting hot. Overreacted. I thought about Sam, staring at that silver box with wide, hopeful eyes, waiting for his name to be called. I thought about Lucy's confusion, her asking me why Grandma didn't have a present for her. I thought about my own chest tightening as I smiled through it all so my kids wouldn't feel the sting I felt. And I overreacted? I typed out a reply. Me. If it wasn't a big deal, then why didn't anyone notice that my kids were the only ones who didn't get anything? Mark replied an hour later. Mark, I don't know, man. Maybe they just didn't do anything gift-worthy this year. No offense, but you've kinda distanced them from the family anyway. That was the moment something snapped. I called Emily into the room, showed her the text. She didn't even blink. There it is, she said. I didn't reply to him. Instead, I sat down and started writing things down. Just bullet points at first. Instances I'd let slide. Comments, exclusions, slights. Things I'd tucked into the back of my mind and labeled not worth fighting over. But looking at them all in one list, it was undeniable. Sam's birthday party last year. My parents didn't come. They had a dentist appointment with Mark's family that magically lasted 6 hours. Lucy's ballet recital. Mom showed up halfway through and left before it ended. When Sam won second place in the science fair, I sent a photo to the group chat. Rachel sent a thumbs up. No one else responded. I'd spent years brushing this stuff off, pretending it wasn't targeted, telling myself I was just being sensitive. But now it was bleeding over into my kids' lives. And that's where I drew the line. I didn't send the kids to Mason's party. Instead, I took them out that weekend, trampoline park, burgers, movie night. Emily and I made the whole day about them. They didn't even ask about their cousins. But on Monday, I got a call from my dad. That was rare. Hey, I said, keeping my voice flat. Jake, he said, we need to talk. About this behavior. You're setting a bad example for the kids. Rachel said Lucy told Mason she wasn't allowed to go to his party because their grandma didn't love her. I felt something twist in my stomach. That's not what we told her. Well, it's what she said. And now Rachel's upset. I let out a slow breath. Maybe Rachel should have thought about that before posting that picture. Dad sighed, like I was exhausting. You've always taken things too personally. I'm calling because I want to fix this. Fix it how? Well, maybe we could all get together. Talk it out. Clear the air. I sent a message saying we wouldn't be attending anything else. I said. That includes talks. Silence. Then he said, so you're punishing everyone for something that wasn't even malicious? I almost laughed. You keep calling it not malicious as if that changes how it felt. Another pause. You're being selfish, Jake. Click. I didn't even realize I'd ended the call until I saw the home screen light up again with another incoming call. Emily came into the room, saw my face, and said, enough. Let's cut them out. I wanted to. God, I wanted to. But part of me still hesitated. That part of me that grew up believing family was everything. That part of me that remembered Christmas mornings and summer BBQs and my mom singing along to oldies in the kitchen. I wasn't ready to torch the bridge, but I was ready to build a better one. One where my kids didn't have to sit at the bottom of a hierarchy they didn't create. That's when I started planning something different. It wasn't revenge. Not yet. But I was done playing defense. Then came the final straw. It was the first week of February. Lucy came home from school with a handmade Valentine's card. She'd written one for everyone she loved. Me, Emily, Sam, even our dog. She made one for Grandma too. I found her in the kitchen taping it to an envelope. What's that, sweetheart? I asked. She smiled. I'm mailing this to Grandma. I want her to know I still love her, even if she forgot. That sentence hit me like a freight train. Even if she forgot. I didn't stop her. I drove her to the mailbox myself. A week later, Lucy asked if Grandma got her card. I said I didn't know. The next day, Rachel posted another picture. It was a stack of cards on my parents' kitchen table. The caption read, so grateful for all the love. The grandkids are the sweetest love letter. I zoomed in. Every card was from her kids. Mason's handwriting. Grace's pink crayon. Caleb's scribbles. Lucy's wasn't there. Emily saw it too. She didn't say a word. She just walked out of the room. That night, I sat in the garage, staring at the old boxes of family photos we never unpacked when we moved. And something settled in me. Something cold. Something quiet. Not rage, clarity. They weren't going to change. They weren't going to wake up one day and realize what they'd done. There would be no apology, no reckoning, no acknowledgement. Just more parties we weren't invited to. More milestones they'd miss. More passive-aggressive texts and photos with us cropped out. But I wasn't going to let them rewrite the story. I was going to write a new one. And they were going to watch it unfold. But I needed a plan. And I needed to start with something small. Something symbolic. Just enough to let them know. We saw everything. And we weren't staying quiet anymore. The house was quiet that night. Too quiet. Lucy had gone to bed early after brushing her teeth in silence. Sam played on his tablet with that same blank stare he wore the day his team lost their first tournament. Emily had curled up on the couch under a blanket, not saying much. I could hear the hum of the fridge, the occasional whir of the heat kicking on, and the soft creak of the walls settling. But inside me, everything was loud. I sat at the kitchen table with a cup of tea I hadn't touched, staring at the phone screen like it might suddenly spit out an apology. Something, anything, that could undo what Lucy had felt, what I had felt. But all it offered was the same post from Rachel, the one with the stack of cards. No Lucy, no acknowledgement, just a curated display of love that excluded us entirely. I thought I'd grown used to the feeling of being overlooked, of being the afterthought, the he means well sibling. But that night, something shifted. It wasn't just that they didn't see me. It was that they didn't want to. They didn't want to acknowledge that I was raising two kind, thoughtful kids who had never once caused drama, who went out of their way to make cards for people who didn't even bother to remember their names at the dinner table. They didn't want to admit that maybe, just maybe, they were wrong. That's when it really hit me. I had spent so many years trying to win approval from people who had already made up their minds. The next few days passed in a fog. I went to work, came home, helped with homework, and kept up the facade of normalcy for the kids. But inside, I was unraveling. I stopped replying to extended family texts. I muted the family group chat. I started sleeping less and walking more. Long walks in the early morning when the world was still dark and I could be alone with the cold. One morning, I walked past the park where I used to take Sam when he was still in diapers. The bench we used to sit on was covered in frost. I remembered how he used to point at the ducks and laugh like it was the funniest thing in the world. I remembered how proud I was the first time he said "dada." And I realized I'd lost that part of myself. Not because of them, because I let them take it from me. I let them chip away at my confidence with every subtle jab, every backhanded comment, every moment of erasure. I let them make me feel small in my own story. And I was done. The first thing I did was take Lucy to the post office. "Let's send another card," I said. But this time, to someone who'll really appreciate it. She looked confused. "Who?" I thought for a second. "Your teacher. You said she liked your drawings, right?" Lucy beamed. She said mine made her smile all week. "Perfect," I said. "Let's send her some sunshine." That tiny shift changed something. For her. For me. It was like a reset. A reminder that we didn't need permission to give love, and we sure didn't need validation to be proud of who we were. I started rebuilding, quietly. No dramatic declarations. No social media posts. Just small, intentional acts that slowly pulled me out of that fog. I enrolled Lucy in an art class she'd been too nervous to try. I showed up early to every one of Sam's basketball games and cheered louder than I ever had. I made pancakes every Saturday and let them pick the toppings, even when that meant rainbow sprinkles and whipped cream for breakfast. I started going to therapy too. At first, I felt silly, sitting in a quiet office talking about my parents like I was 15 again. But after a few sessions, it clicked. "You've been grieving something that never existed," my therapist said one afternoon. "The idea of a family that sees you, values you. And every time they prove that idea wrong, it reopens the wound." I sat with that for a long time. It was true. I wasn't just angry. I was mourning. Not just for me, but for the father I wanted my dad to be. For the mother who I hoped would fight for my kids the way she used to fight for Mark's. For the siblings I'd always imagined would be my support system in adulthood. They didn't exist. And once I let go of the fantasy, I had space to build something real. Emily noticed the change. "You've been calmer," she said one night as we folded laundry. Not quiet, just more centered. I smiled. I stopped waiting for them to change. It didn't happen all at once. There were still moments that stung. A birthday party we weren't invited to. A family photo posted without us. Comments like, "Miss seeing you guys," that felt more like paper cuts than genuine remorse. But I got better at brushing them off. Not because I didn't care, but because I cared more about protecting what I was building here. In this house. With Emily and the kids. In March, Sam won his regional science competition. He built a water filtration model out of recycled materials, and when they called his name, his face lit up like he'd just touched the stars. After the ceremony, he came running up to me. "Did you see? Dad, did you see?" "I saw everything, buddy." He looked around. "Do you think Grandpa would be proud?" That question hit me like a punch. I crouched down, looked him in the eyes, and said, "I'm proud. That's what matters." He nodded slowly, and that was the last time he asked. By April, I was starting to feel something I hadn't felt in years: freedom. I cleaned out the garage, donated old furniture, organized the kids' artwork into frames, and started hanging them in the hallway. Our hallway became our gallery. Each piece was a badge of joy, a celebration of little moments no one else had thought to see. Emily suggested we take a weekend trip, just the four of us. Nothing big, just a cabin by the lake, some hiking trails, and a chance to unplug. We went in early May. There was no cell signal, no internet, just birdsong in the morning, the sound of water lapping against the dock, and the smell of Emily's coffee brewing before sunrise. We roasted marshmallows, played card games. Sam caught a fish and wouldn't stop talking about it for days. Lucy painted the lake with watercolors. Emily read books on the porch, and I watched them all, feeling something in my chest expand. Not in a loud, triumphant way, in a quiet, steady way, like breathing after holding your breath for too long. That weekend, I made a decision. I was done being passive, done waiting for them to notice what they'd lost. They wouldn't, and that was fine, but they were still posting. Still parading their curated version of family on Facebook and Instagram. Still presenting themselves as the warm, loving grandparents with a house full of laughter. And I knew it wasn't true. So I started documenting our own story. Not for revenge. For record. I created a private Instagram. Just for us. Just for the moments that mattered. Emily baking with Lucy. Sam presenting his science project. Our hikes. Our inside jokes. Our pancake Saturdays. No hashtags. No captions fishing for approval. Just truth. Eventually, people noticed. Old family friends. Former neighbors. Co-workers. They'd comment quietly. "Your kids look so happy. You seem so grounded. Looks like a beautiful life." And it was. Without them. That realization was both painful and liberating. It was June when I got the letter. Not a text. Not an email. An actual letter, in my mailbox, addressed in my mother's handwriting. I stood in the driveway for 10 full minutes before opening it. Inside was a folded card. On the front, a picture of a tree. Inside, just one line. "We'd like to talk. Before the holidays." No signature. I brought it inside, laid it on the counter, and stared at it. Emily picked it up. "Read it. Put it back down." Then she said, "That's not an apology." "No," I said. "It's an opening." To what? That was the question. Part of me wanted to respond. To see if they'd changed. To give them the benefit of the doubt. But another part of me, the part that had rebuilt brick by brick, wasn't sure if I wanted to let them in again. I didn't answer right away. I let the summer pass. We built memories instead. And quietly, behind the scenes, I started planning something bigger. Something they wouldn't see coming. Something that wasn't about proving a point, but about setting one in stone. Because while I had found peace, they hadn't seen the cost of their choices. Not yet. But they would. The letter stayed on the kitchen counter for 3 days. By the time I finally picked it up again, the edges had curled slightly, absorbing the weight of our silence. I stared at the words, "We'd like to talk. Before the holidays." As if there might be something I missed, some hint of regret hidden between the lines. But no, it wasn't an apology. It was a preemptive move. A warning shot disguised as diplomacy. And the timing wasn't random. Summer was ending, and the holidays were inching closer. Thanksgiving, Christmas, New Year's. All the days that were once ours before they slowly stopped including us. I didn't tell Emily right away what I decided. I wasn't even sure it was a decision yet. But something had started to take shape in my mind. Not an outburst. Not a confrontation. Something quieter. Smarter. Something they wouldn't see coming. Because here's what I'd learned. They never see it coming when the scapegoat stops playing along. I started with the will. Not mine, theirs. See, a few years back, before everything fractured, my dad had insisted on making things official. He invited all 3 of us kids over one weekend, me, Mark, and Rachel, to talk about estate planning. It was a formal conversation over wine and cheese about what would happen to the house, the business shares, the lake property. At the time, I didn't care. I was uncomfortable just being in the same room while they divvied up assets that weren't even cold yet. But what I remembered, what stuck, was that Mark had insisted on being the executor. And Dad, of course, agreed. Rachel nodded along like it was all fair and reasonable. And me? I'd nodded too, even though I felt something gnawing in my gut. That night, Mark said to me in the kitchen, "It's just logistics, Jake. You're the furthest away anyway. As if that explained everything. But now, with the letter on the table and silence still humming in the group chat, I realized I needed to know more. Not out of greed, out of strategy. So I made a call. Not to my parents. To Eli. Eli and I had been roommates in college. He became an estate lawyer. We hadn't talked in years, but we were still connected on LinkedIn, and I knew he'd kept his practice small and private, just the way I needed it. When I told him I needed some guidance on family planning, he didn't hesitate. We met for lunch the next day. Over sandwiches and coffee, I explained everything. Not just the recent drama, but the years of subtle exclusion. The birthday parties. The favoritism. The final straw with Lucy's Valentine. Eli didn't interrupt much. Just listened and nodded, eyes sharp. When I finished, he leaned back and said, "So what do you want to do? Cut ties?" I shook my head. "No. I want to protect what's mine. And I want to be ready." He nodded. "All right. Then we start with your assets. Your will. Your trusts. Because if they ever come knocking, especially if your parents pass and Mark's in charge, you need everything airtight. I can also request a public record search. If they filed a will, it might be accessible, depending on how they structured it." 2 days later, Eli called me back. "They've got a trust set up, standard stuff. The house, the accounts, the property. Mark's the executor. Rachel's the secondary. You're mentioned, but not equally." I exhaled slowly. "Figures. Want to know what stood out?" "Sure. They've already transferred partial ownership of the lake property to Mark and Rachel. It's a quitclaim deed, filed last year." My stomach dropped. The lake property. The one my grandfather built. The one we all used to visit as kids. The one my father promised, years ago, would be shared equally. "This land belongs to the whole family," he'd said. Turns out, whole family meant something different to him. I didn't tell Emily right away. I needed time to think. Instead, I started laying the groundwork. Step 1, tighten my circle. I told Emily everything a few nights later after the kids went to bed. She didn't even blink. Just nodded and said, "We protect our kids. Period." Then I called my cousin Ben. Ben was the family outlier, like me. Grew up being compared to Mark and Rachel. The difference was, he stopped attending family functions 5 years ago after a fight over money and never looked back. We reconnected after I saw him liking one of our family photos on Instagram. When I told him what had happened over the holidays, he said, "Jake, I cut them out for a reason. You're just late to the party." "Yeah," I muttered. "But I want to do more than walk away." Ben chuckled. "You want to flip the script?" Exactly. Ben was in tech now, ran a media agency that specialized in brand image, digital storytelling, and reputation management. He'd built his own following by exposing fake family influencers, calling out curated toxicity with receipts. "You've got 2 things going for you," he said. 1, truth. 2, a documented history. You've kept everything. Photos, messages, proof. Most people don't have that. So what do I do with it? Ben leaned in. "You tell your story, but not yet. Not loudly. First, you show the people who matter that your life is better without them. That you're not bitter, you're thriving." That's when it clicked. I wasn't going to argue with them. I wasn't going to confront them. I was going to erase them back. Slowly, quietly. Step 2, reclaim the legacy. I'd spent my whole life letting them control the narrative. The Jake's just different narrative. The Jake keeps his distance excuse. The version of me that fit neatly into their hierarchy. But now, I had something they didn't expect, momentum. I reached out to the local historical society near the lake property. My grandfather, it turns out, had done a lot for the community, volunteered during floods, ran the summer fishing derby for kids, built the first dock with his own hands. They had records, photos, newspaper clippings. I asked if I could contribute. By the end of the week, I was helping them create a legacy wall dedicated to my grandfather's contributions. And on that wall, I made sure there was a photo of me, age 10, holding a fish with Grandpa, standing right on that dock. It was small, but it was mine. Step 3, go quiet. I didn't respond to the letter. Didn't reply to the follow-up text Rachel sent in October. "Are you guys coming to Thanksgiving? Mom's making your favorite stuffing." I didn't block them. I just became untraceable. No updates. No responses. No access. I turned our private Instagram into a newsletter instead. The 4 of us became a monthly email I sent to a curated list of real friends, Emily's parents, a few of the kids' teachers. I shared stories, Sam's science updates, Lucy's art projects, our lake weekend memories, Emily's herb garden progress. It was personal, honest, and completely outside the reach of my parents, Mark and Rachel. We stopped being the forgotten ones. We became the unreachable ones. Step 4. Prepare the reveal. I wasn't planning to go public anytime soon. I wasn't planning to confront them in some dramatic Thanksgiving scene. But I did have something in mind. Ben helped me set up a private server, a cloud-based drive where I could upload photos, documents, text exchanges, and a full written record of our experience, organized chronologically. It was password protected, just in case. I'm not saying drop it now, he said. But if they ever try to smear you, if they ever start spinning the Jake abandoned the family narrative, you have this. I added to it little by little. The photo of Lucy's handmade card, screenshots of ignored texts, video clips of Sam's award ceremony, unclicked in the group chat, Rachel's Instagram captions, Dad's voicemail, the estate record showing the transfer of the lake house. All of it, quietly, carefully documented. Not to share yet, but to keep. For the moment they pushed too far. And something told me they would. The final step was the clean break. In early November, I wrote a letter. Not to them. To myself. I wrote everything I wanted to say, but never would. I poured it all out. The disappointment, the anger, the guilt, the grief. I let myself mourn the parents I thought I had, the siblings I wanted, the idea of a united family. Then I folded it up, put it in an envelope, wrote enough on the front, sealed it. I burned it in the fireplace that night while Emily sat beside me, the kids asleep upstairs. And when the flames died down, I felt lighter. It wasn't closure, but it was peace. For the first time in years, I wasn't waiting. I wasn't hoping. I was ready. Ready for the holidays. Ready for the final play. Because when the invitations arrived, when they dared to send another photo, another text, another card designed to guilt us back into submission, I'd be holding all the cards. And they wouldn't even know it. Not yet, but soon. It came, as I knew it would, 2 weeks before Christmas. A glossy envelope in our mailbox, addressed to the Armstrong family, handwritten in my mother's careful, almost obsessive cursive. I didn't open it right away. I let it sit on the dining table while I made tea, while Emily wrapped gifts in the other room, while Lucy hummed carols under her breath and Sam stared into the fireplace, lost in thought. The envelope caught the light like it knew what it was carrying, like it had purpose. I opened it after the kids went to bed. Inside was a tri-folded card with a gold-embossed pinecone wreath on the front. Inside, printed in elegant script, "Please join us for our annual Armstrong family Christmas brunch. December 24th at 10 a.m. Bringing together the ones we love most. Pajamas encouraged, mimosas provided." And just below, in ballpoint pen, "Would love to see the kids. Let's reconnect." No signature. No apology. Just a passive invitation designed to rewrite the narrative. Pretend nothing happened. Paint us as the ones who withdrew. Emily found me standing by the sink, the card still in my hand. "They sent it, huh?" I nodded. "They're trying to play nice before they rewrite the story." She didn't say anything for a moment. Then, "Are we ready?" I looked at her, and something in me settled. Yeah, we are. The revenge, if you can even call it that, wasn't loud. It wasn't a dramatic speech at the Christmas table or a tearful confrontation in the snow. It was surgical, clean, measured. It began with the reply. I wrote back, not with sarcasm, not with anger, with clarity. "Thank you for the invitation. We will not be attending. We've made other plans this year and going forward. Please respect our space. We wish you the best." I sent it by registered mail. A signature required. They received it 2 days later. No response. But I knew that wouldn't be the end. Sure enough, Rachel posted a photo the next week. Her living room decked out like a Hallmark set, her kids in matching reindeer onesies, Mark and his wife in the background laughing with glasses of eggnog. And the caption? "No matter how hard the year gets, we choose love, grace, and family. We're stronger together." A subtle shot across the bow. A setup. Then, a comment appeared under the post. From one of Rachel's followers. A mutual we both knew from years ago. "Where's Jake and his family? Miss seeing their adorable kids in these." Rachel responded with a heart emoji and, "Some people choose distance. We still love them." That was the spark I'd been waiting for. Not to lash out. To correct the record. I opened the cloud drive Ben had helped me build. I scrolled through the folders. One in particular had been building all year. Evidence of exclusion. I copied the public link and added a simple message. Just for those curious about our distance. Truth matters. I posted it beneath Rachel's comment. And then I logged off. The reaction was quiet at first. A few likes. A few DMs from people who had followed our family for years and always wondered why we seemed to vanish. Then, a ripple. Ben called me later that night, grinning through the phone. Dude, you dropped a nuke wrapped in ribbon. I didn't lie. You didn't have to. The screenshots speak for themselves. Because that's what it was, a quiet, methodical documentation of every erasure, every text ignored, every photo cropped. The silver box on New Year's with Lucy and Sam sitting empty-handed. The group chat messages left on read. The voicemail from my father calling me selfish. The estate documents showing the lake house transfer. I didn't add commentary. I didn't need to. Within 24 hours, the post was gone. Rachel had deleted it, comments and all. But not before the screenshots made it around. People saw it. People finally saw it. I got texts from distant cousins. Messages from family friends. Even an email from a former neighbor who'd once asked if we were okay, but never followed up. I had no idea. Your kids didn't deserve that. Thank you for sharing the truth. I always wondered why you stopped showing up. Now I understand. It wasn't about dragging them through the mud. It was about reclaiming the story. They weren't the victims. They were the architects. And now, the narrative was out of their hands. But I didn't stop there. Remember the Historical Society project? I made a second submission. An essay titled Legacy and Loss, a Grandson's Reflection on Inheritance and Integrity. It was about my grandfather, about the dock he built and the way he welcomed all of us grandkids equally, about the quiet integrity he carried that seemed to vanish with the next generation. I didn't name names. I didn't point fingers. But I told the truth. The essay was published in their winter newsletter, shared across the town's mailing list, framed in the welcome center by the lake, just beneath that same photo of me and Grandpa holding the fish. My father saw it. I know he did. He didn't call. He sent a single email. I wish you hadn't done that. Some things are meant to stay private. I stared at it for a long time. Then I replied, respect is earned. Silence is not love. No answer. Christmas morning came. Snow fell in soft sheets. The kids woke up late. Older now, less frantic, but still wide-eyed when they saw the presents. Emily made cinnamon rolls from scratch. We played board games, watched movies, opened gifts with no rush, no anxiety, no false smiles. It was just us, the four of us. The Armstrongs they forgot, the Armstrongs they underestimated. Sam gave me a hug before bed and said, "This was the best Christmas ever." Lucy added, "I didn't miss anything." I smiled. Me neither. The fallout? Predictable. The group chat eventually burst to life with carefully worded outrage. Mark sent a message. What you did was cruel. You aired private family matters. Rachel chimed in. You humiliated Mom. She's been crying for days. Mom herself wrote a separate message. You broke my heart, Jake. I was trying to fix things. And Dad? He didn't message. He called. I didn't answer. I sent a photo instead. It was Lucy's Valentine's card, the one they never acknowledged. Underneath, I added a caption. This was your moment to fix things. You chose to ignore it. We chose not to be ignored anymore. I left the group chat after that. Deleted it from my phone. Blocked the numbers. I wasn't angry. I wasn't vindictive. I was done. Ben told me later, you didn't just win. You rewrote the ending. And maybe that's true. But to me, it didn't feel like winning. It felt like healing. It felt like carving out space in the world where my children never had to question their worth, where they never had to shrink themselves to fit someone else's comfort, where love wasn't conditional, where family meant belonging. And that was worth everything. As I tucked Lucy in that night, she asked, will we ever go back to Grandma's? I kissed her forehead. No, sweetie. We don't go where we're not celebrated. She smiled sleepily. Good. Then she rolled over and fell asleep in peace. So did I, for the first time in years. And in that silence, I understood something my parents never did. Sometimes, the real inheritance isn't land or money. It's the freedom to walk away and the power to never look back. I'm Brian, 27, and I just bought my first apartment after years of juggling 2 jobs. I'm not exaggerating when I say this place means everything to me. For years, I worked nights stocking shelves at a grocery store after spending my days at an office that barely paid me enough to keep up with rent. My weekends disappeared into overtime, and vacations were something other people posted about on Instagram. I cut back on eating out, stopped buying new clothes unless absolutely necessary, and learned how to make a week's worth of meals stretch on 20 bucks. Every dollar saved had a purpose. Every late night and early morning was fueled by this idea. One day, I'd have a place that was mine. No landlord. No roommate drama. Just mine. The day I signed the papers, I walked into the empty apartment and let out this laugh that came from somewhere deep in my chest. It wasn't fancy. One bedroom, a kitchen that still smelled faintly of paint, creaky pipes that made the occasional groan, but it was mine. I wanted to share that feeling. So I called my mom first, expecting her to scream or cry with happiness. Instead, she just said, "That's nice, Brian. When's the housewarming?" Her tone was flat, almost distracted. I brushed it off, thinking maybe she was tired. I set a date for the next weekend. I ordered pizzas, stocked the fridge with drinks, and even borrowed folding chairs from a neighbor because I didn't have enough furniture yet. I wanted everyone to feel welcome. I imagined laughter echoing through the place, my cousins checking out the little balcony, my parents congratulating me. It wasn't just a party. It was my way of saying, "Look, I did it." All the hard work paid off. The morning of, I texted the family group chat a reminder. A few people liked the message. My sister didn't reply at all. I brushed off the nerves and started arranging the pizzas, making sure the apartment looked as good as possible. By 6 o'clock, I was standing at the window, waiting for someone to pull up. By 6:30, I was still waiting. By 7, my phone buzzed. My cousin had posted a picture of a barbecue on Instagram. Everyone was there. My parents, my sister, aunts, uncles, cousins, even the kids running around with sparklers in hand. The caption read, "Family time. Nothing better than this." I just stared at the screen, the smell of cooling pizza heavy in the air. I tried calling Mom, but it went to voicemail. Same with Dad. I even texted my sister. Nothing. The apartment was quiet, except for the hum of the fridge. I sat at my little table, 3 large pizzas untouched, soda bottles unopened, and for the first time in years, I felt the kind of loneliness that sits heavy on your chest. I didn't even touch the food. I just sat there, scrolling through picture after picture of everyone laughing at my cousin's barbecue, the kind of laughter I had dreamed would fill my place. Around 9, my phone finally rang. Mom's name lit up the screen. I picked up, half expecting an apology. Instead, she sounded casual, almost cheerful. "Hey, Brian. Your uncle was saying something smart today. He thinks maybe you should put the deed to the apartment in his name. You know, for the family. That way it stays in our circle. It's just safer that way." I remember gripping the phone so tight my knuckles went white. My own mother hadn't shown up to my first real celebration, and instead she was calling to suggest I hand over my apartment to my uncle. She said it like it was nothing. Like my years of sacrifice were just a placeholder until someone else in the family decided they wanted a piece of it. I didn't say much. I just listened, my heart pounding in my ears, my stomach churning. She went on about how it would make things easier and how family should share. Then she said the words that made my jaw clench. "You understand, right?" That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay awake staring at the ceiling, my apartment suddenly feeling smaller, colder. Their absence at the party was one thing, but this was different. This was them telling me, plain and simple, that my sacrifices didn't matter, not unless they could take credit or control. I realized, in that moment, that my family didn't see me as someone who had achieved something. They saw me as a resource. And I couldn't shake the thought. If they were bold enough to ask for the deed now, what else would they try to take later? I didn't know what to say to Mom yet. I didn't know how to respond. But I knew one thing for sure. Something inside me had shifted. That was the night I stopped seeing my family the way I used to. And it was just the beginning of what came next. I didn't call Mom back that night. I couldn't. Every time I picked up the phone to type something, my hands froze. What do you even say when your own mother suggests handing over the deed to your home like it's some spare chair in the garage? I thought maybe, just maybe, she would realize how insane it sounded and call again the next day with an apology. But no apology came. The next morning, my phone buzzed with a notification from the family group chat. My uncle, yes, the very one Mom thought I should sign the deed over to, had posted a picture of himself flipping burgers at the barbecue, captioned, "Nothing like family sticking together." Do you know what cut the deepest? My mom had commented with 3 red heart emojis. My sister chimed in with, "Best night ever." And me? Not a word. No, sorry we missed your party. No, congrats, Brian. Not even a thumbs up. It was like my celebration had never existed. I didn't say anything, but the silence between me and my family grew heavy. A few days later, Mom called again, casual as if nothing had happened. So, Brian, did you think about what I said? What you said about giving Uncle the deed? I asked flatly. Yes, she replied, her tone sharp, like I was being slow. It's just the responsible thing to do. He's older. He knows how to handle property. You're still young. It's not good for one person to hold all the power in the family. I laughed, but it wasn't out of humor. Mom, I worked for years to afford this place. Why would I sign it over to him? Her sigh was long, disappointed, the same sigh I used to hear when I got a B instead of an A in school. You're being selfish, Brian. Family comes first. You think we didn't sacrifice for you? You think you did this all alone? That word, selfish, lodged itself in my chest like a thorn. Was it selfish to want the one thing I worked my entire 20s for? The apartment wasn't just walls and windows. It was the sleepless nights, the stress headaches, the times I skipped meals to save. But apparently, in my family's eyes, it was a toy they thought I should share, even hand over completely. A week later, I tried to extend an olive branch. I invited my parents for dinner, just them, hoping maybe face-to-face we could talk things out. I cooked pasta, bought a bottle of wine I couldn't really afford, and tried to make the place feel warm. They showed up an hour late, Dad barely looking up from his phone as he walked in. Mom scanned the apartment like she was inspecting it for flaws. It's small, she said, wrinkling her nose. But nice for now, I suppose. Throughout dinner, the conversation circled back again and again to my cousin. Did you hear Jason might get promoted at work? Jason's barbecue was such a success, everyone came. Jason's kids are doing so well in school. It was like they had rehearsed a script where I was just the audience, not part of the conversation. At one point, Dad finally looked up from his phone and said, "You know, your uncle's right. It might be smarter to keep the deed under his name. Less risk. What if you lose your job? What if the market crashes? At least with him, it's safe." I set down my fork and stared at them. "So you came here, to my home, just to tell me I should hand it over?" Mom waved a hand. "Don't be so dramatic. We're just looking out for you. And for the family. It's not always about you, Brian. Not always about me." That line clung to me long after they left, their plates half-eaten, the wine barely touched. I washed the dishes in silence, my stomach twisted with a mix of anger and sadness. All I had wanted was a moment of acknowledgement. Maybe a "we're proud of you." Instead, I got a lecture about how I wasn't responsible enough to own what I had earned. Things didn't improve. The following weekend, my sister called, not to congratulate me, but to ask if she could throw her birthday party in my apartment. "Your place is new, it's fresh, and Jason said his backyard is too messy. Plus, you don't have that much furniture yet, so it's basically open space. It'd be perfect." I asked if she was serious. "Of course I'm serious. Don't be weird about it. It's just one night. You should be happy the family even wants to use your place." I told her no, firmly. She hung up on me. The fallout was immediate. My mom called an hour later, furious. "Your sister's in tears. She just wanted one night, Brian. Why do you have to be so difficult? Why do you push family away?" "Because family never shows up for me." I snapped before I could stop myself. Silence. Then Mom said, coldly, "Keep talking like that, and you'll see how quickly family disappears." And she hung up. From then on, I was painted as the difficult one. I saw it in the way texts slowed down, in the way I wasn't invited to dinners or birthdays. I'd scroll through social media and see my family gathered around tables, smiling, raising glasses, and there was always this ache in my chest, followed by the same question. What did I do that was so unforgivable? It became clearer over time. My cousin Jason was the golden boy. His barbecues, his job promotions, his kids, all celebrated. My achievements? Either ignored or twisted into something selfish. I was the outsider, the one they could guilt, manipulate, or exclude when convenient. But the real turning point came one Sunday afternoon. I had just gotten back from the grocery store when I noticed something odd, a sticky note taped to my door. It read, "Call us. Important." Signed with my uncle's name. Confused, I called him. He picked up on the first ring, cheerful. "Brian, just the man I wanted to talk to. We've been discussing it, and we think it's time you made things official. You should transfer the apartment deed to me." That way, the family can start making plans with it. I stood in my hallway, grocery bag still in hand, my heart hammering. Plans with it. What does that mean? Oh, he said breezily. Maybe use it as collateral if someone needs a loan. Maybe let your sister stay there for a while once she moves out of her dorm. It's all about sharing, Brian. That's what family does. I could barely breathe. So, you want me to give up my apartment so it can be passed around like a family timeshare? Exactly, he said, as if I had finally understood something obvious. You're young. You'll bounce back. But for us, it's security. We'll all benefit. Don't you want that? I hung up before I said something I couldn't take back. That night, as I sat at my little table surrounded by unopened mail and untouched groceries, I realized something had shifted even further. This wasn't just about them skipping my housewarming. This wasn't about favoritism or guilt tripping. This was about control. My family didn't see me as Brian, the guy who had fought tooth and nail for his first apartment. They saw me as a resource, a deed, a safety net. And as much as they pushed, as much as they tried to corner me, something inside me hardened. I wasn't going to let them take it. But I also knew, if I said no outright, the pressure would only get worse. And the way my mom had said, "You'll see how quickly family disappears," kept ringing in my ears. I had no idea just how far they were willing to go. And I had no idea how far I'd be willing to push back. I didn't think they'd actually go through with it. For weeks after that call from my uncle, I kept telling myself they were just testing me, trying to push boundaries the way they always did. I thought if I ignored their comments, if I stayed quiet long enough, they'd lose interest and move on to someone else. But that's the thing about people who feel entitled to your life. They don't just stop. They double down. The breaking point came on a Thursday afternoon. I remember it because I had just finished a brutal double shift, 7 hours at the office, another 6 unloading boxes at the grocery store. I was dragging my feet up the stairs to my apartment, grocery bag with a single carton of milk swinging at my side, when I noticed my door wasn't closed all the way. Just a crack, wide enough that the latch hadn't caught. My stomach dropped. I live in a building where you don't leave doors unlocked, not even for 5 minutes. I pushed it open, and the first thing I saw was my sister's purse sitting on my couch. Then I heard voices, my mom, my uncle, and my sister, standing in my kitchen like they owned the place. "Brian, you're back early," Mom said, her voice sugar-sweet but a little shaky. I dropped the milk on the counter, staring at them. "What are you doing here?" Uncle grinned, leaning against my fridge like it was his. "We were just looking around. Talking plans." Plans. My voice cracked from exhaustion and disbelief. My sister, scrolling through her phone like she was bored, finally chimed in. "We're thinking about how to rearrange things once I move in. The bedroom's a little small, but I guess I can make it work. Maybe put Brian on the couch for a while, just until I settle in." I felt the blood rush to my head. "What?" Mom rolled her eyes, like I was a child throwing a tantrum. "Don't overreact. Your sister needs a stable place while she finishes school. You hardly use the space anyway, Brian. You're either at work or asleep. What's the harm in sharing? It's family." I took a step back, gripping the edge of the counter to steady myself. "You broke into my apartment." No, Uncle said quickly, raising his hands like he was the reasonable one. "Your mother has a spare key. She just thought it'd be easier to talk this through if we were inside, seeing the space. We're trying to help." That word, spare key, hit me like a hammer. I had given Mom a copy when I first moved in, thinking it was practical, just in case I locked myself out. I never imagined she'd use it to waltz in and plan my eviction. "Help?" I spat. "Help with what?" "Kicking me out of my own apartment." My mom's voice hardened, dropping the sweet tone entirely. "Don't be so dramatic, Brian. This isn't just about you. We've been talking, and it makes sense. You're single, you don't have kids, you don't need all this space to yourself. Your sister has her whole future ahead of her. She needs a home base, and you can make that sacrifice. It's what good sons do for their family." I wanted to scream. Instead, I laughed, a hollow, bitter laugh I barely recognized as mine. "So let me get this straight. You all skip my housewarming. You tell me to sign over the deed to Uncle, and now you break into my place to decide how you're going to move my sister in." Uncle shrugged like it was the most obvious thing in the world. "Better to do it sooner than later. If we wait too long, you'll get stubborn. And that wouldn't be good for anyone." That last line, it chilled me. Because in his voice, I heard a threat. Not physical, but something worse. The certainty that they could isolate me, twist the narrative, and make me the villain if I resisted. I told them to get out. My voice shook, but I repeated it until the words came out sharp. My sister muttered something under her breath about me being selfish. Mom gave me a look that was equal parts pity and disdain. Uncle just smirked. "We'll give you time to think about it," he said as he walked out, as if it was already a done deal. When the door finally shut, I stood there in silence, the air in my apartment suddenly feeling wrong, tainted. My safe space, the one thing I had fought so hard for, had been invaded. My own family had used my trust, my spare key, as a weapon against me. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept hearing their voices in my kitchen, talking like I was a guest in my own home. I kept seeing my sister casually claiming the bedroom, like my life was just an inconvenience to her. And worst of all, I kept hearing Uncle's voice. Better to do it sooner than later. The next day, I left work early and went straight to the hardware store. I bought a new lock, one only I had the key to. I changed it that night, my hands shaking as I tightened the screws. When the final click echoed through the door, I felt something shift inside me. Not relief, but resolve. I thought maybe that would be the end of it. That if I drew a line, they'd back off. But I underestimated them. 2 days later, I came home to find a note slipped under my door. It was from my mom, written in her neat, looping handwriting. "We need to talk. You're making things harder than they have to be. Family shares. Call me before it's too late." Too late. It was no longer just about my apartment. It was about control, about obedience, about whether I'd keep playing the role they'd written for me all my life. The quiet son who never argued, who worked hard but never asked for recognition, who handed over whatever scraps of success he managed to claw together so the real stars of the family could shine. That was the night I realized the betrayal wasn't just that they skipped my party or that they wanted my apartment. The real betrayal was that they never saw me at all. To them, I wasn't Brian, a man who had fought for something he could finally call his own. I was just a resource, a placeholder, a couch they could sit on until they were ready to move. And once you see that truth, you can't unsee it. I didn't know it then, but that was the moment I stopped trying to win their approval. That was the moment the bitterness started turning into something else, something sharper. Because if they thought they could strip me of what I'd earned, they were about to learn just how wrong they were. After that day, my apartment didn't feel like mine anymore. I'd walk through the door after work and half expect to hear my mom's voice drifting from the kitchen or my sister stretched out on the couch like it was hers. I had changed the locks, sure, but the air still carried the weight of their intrusion. Every corner reminded me of that afternoon. My uncle's smug grin by the fridge, my sister's purse thrown on the couch, my mom's voice calling me selfish in my own home. It was like they had left a stain that no amount of scrubbing could erase. I slipped into a routine of avoidance. Calls went unanswered. Group chat messages remained unread. I started telling coworkers I was too busy to visit family, when in reality, I just couldn't face the storm I knew was brewing. But the silence didn't give me peace. It gave me space to think, and thinking turned into replaying every word, every slight, every look of disappointment or dismissal. I realized it wasn't just about the apartment. It never was. My whole life, I had been the afterthought, the easy one, the one who could be leaned on without anyone worrying whether I'd break. The weeks that followed were heavy. I'd sit in my apartment at night with the TV on, but I wasn't watching. My food would go cold before I touched it. I'd scroll through social media only to see my family's smiling faces at gatherings I hadn't even been invited to. My cousin Jason had another barbecue, another round of praise from my parents in the comments. "So proud of you, Jason. Always bringing us together." My stomach turned every time I read their words. Not once had they said anything like that about me. It hit me hardest one Saturday morning. I went to the grocery store, same as always, but instead of heading straight home, I drove past my parents' house. I don't even know why. Habit, maybe, or some masochistic need to see if they missed me. Their driveway was packed with cars. Laughter spilled from the backyard. I slowed down, just enough to catch a glimpse of my family gathered around the grill. My uncle had a beer in hand. My mom sat beside him, smiling like everything was perfect. My sister waved her phone in the air, snapping photos. I pulled over half a block away and just sat there, gripping the wheel. My heart pounded in my chest, not from anger this time, but from something worse, grief. They weren't even thinking about me. I had been erased, replaced by the cousin who could throw a decent barbecue. And the cruel part? They seemed happier without me. I didn't go inside. I didn't even turn the car around for a while. I just sat there until my eyes burned, until the groceries in the back seat started to sweat in the heat. Eventually, I drove home in silence. The image of that backyard burned into my mind. That night, I didn't bother cooking. I left the groceries on the counter, unopened. I lay on my bed, staring at the ceiling, and for the first time since buying the apartment, I wondered if maybe they were right. Maybe I was selfish. Maybe I didn't deserve to keep something just for myself. The thought scared me because it sounded like their voice inside my head. The days blurred after that. Work became just noise in the background of my thoughts. I'd smile when customers asked for help at the grocery store, nod during meetings at the office, but my mind was somewhere else entirely. I'd catch myself staring at my phone, thumb hovering over mom's contact, tempted to call and apologize. For what? I didn't even know. Just to stop feeling this heavy emptiness. But every time I thought about caving, I remembered that moment in my kitchen. My sister casually laying claim to my bedroom. My uncle saying it'd be better to do it sooner than later. My mom calling me selfish for wanting to live in the space I had bled for. And I'd put the phone down. The real breaking point, the moment that shoved me all the way down, came a few weeks later. My dad called out of the blue. His voice was oddly cheerful. "Hey, Brian. We're having a little get-together this weekend. You should come." Something in me sparked, a pathetic flicker of hope. Maybe they had come around. Maybe they wanted to make peace. "Where is it?" I asked. "At Jason's place," Dad said. Of course. I hesitated. "And why invite me now?" There was a pause, then Dad chuckled. "Your uncle says it's time we all sat down and sorted this apartment thing. Don't be stubborn, son. Bring the deed papers, we'll talk it over like adults." My hand tightened on the phone until my knuckles hurt. That was the only reason they wanted me there. Not to see me, not to celebrate me, but to pressure me. To corner me in front of everyone until I gave in. I told them I'd think about it. Then I hung up and threw my phone across the couch. That weekend, I didn't go. I stayed home, blinds drawn, the sound of distant fireworks echoing through the night. When I checked my phone later, the group chat was flooded with pictures of the family meeting. My sister had even posted a photo of an empty chair at the table with the caption, "Guess who's too selfish to show up?" That broke me. Not the invasion, not the threats, not the casual dismissal. That picture, that empty chair labeled as me. Like I wasn't just absent, I was a joke. I spent the next week in a haze. I went to work. I came home. I avoided mirrors because I couldn't stand looking at myself. I had fought so hard for this apartment, for this life, and now it felt like I was losing both. But somewhere in the middle of that fog, a thought began to form. It was faint at first, fragile, but it grew stronger every time I saw another message or another photo. Maybe I couldn't make them see my worth. Maybe I couldn't force them to respect me, but I didn't have to keep playing their game. Late one night, I sat at my kitchen table, pen and notebook in hand. For the first time, I started writing things down. Plans, ideas, tiny sparks of rebellion. I wasn't ready to act yet, but just putting it on paper gave me a strange sense of power. Quiet, small, but real. Because if they were going to treat me like an outsider, maybe it was time I stopped fighting to be let in. And if they thought I was going to roll over and hand them everything I worked for, maybe it was time I showed them just how wrong they were. But before any of that, I had to sit with the pain. I had to sink to the bottom, let it press down on me until I couldn't breathe, because only then would I know what it meant to rise back up. And as I sat there in that silence, pen hovering over paper, I realized something important. The next move would be mine. When you hit the bottom, you start to see things differently. That's what surprised me most. For weeks I had been drowning in that hollow loneliness, convinced I was nothing more than the selfish caricature my family painted me to be. But once I sat at that kitchen table with a notebook and a pen, it was like I finally had a light in the darkness. At first, my plans weren't really plans. They were fragments, angry scribbles about changing the locks again, cutting everyone off, proving them wrong somehow. But the more I wrote, the calmer I became. Slowly, those scribbles turned into structured lists. Questions like, what do I want that has nothing to do with them? What would success look like on my own terms? And the biggest one, how do I make sure they never have power over me again? I realized I had spent so long chasing their approval that I had never really thought about my own. For years, every achievement felt empty until mom or dad said, "Good job." Every step forward, I'd look sideways, hoping someone in my family noticed. And when they didn't, I'd shrink back into myself. But now, I was done looking sideways. The first real change came at work. I'd been coasting at the office job, doing just enough to get by because I always told myself, this isn't forever. It's just until I can breathe. But one afternoon, my manager pulled me aside after a meeting and said, "Brian, you've got good ideas, but you don't speak up. Why is that?" Normally, I would have laughed it off, muttered something about being tired, and let the moment pass. But that day, something clicked. Why wasn't I speaking up? Why was I holding back? I had ideas, solid ones, and I was tired of pretending otherwise. So, the next meeting, when they asked for suggestions on a project, I raised my hand. My voice shook at first, but I pushed through. By the time I finished, people were nodding, even jotting notes. 2 weeks later, my manager asked me to lead a small team on a new assignment. It wasn't a promotion, not officially, but it was trust, responsibility, proof that maybe I was more than the quiet kid in the corner. At the grocery store, I cut back my hours. It was scary, giving up that safety net, but I told myself it was time to stop surviving and start building. The extra energy I had went into learning. I spent nights at my desk, laptop glowing, teaching myself new skills, Excel formulas, project management tools, even some coding. Stuff I used to scroll past because I was too tired to care. But now I cared. Because every skill I added was another brick in the wall between me and my family's control. The apartment itself began to change, too. I stopped seeing it as a battleground and started shaping it into my sanctuary. I bought a secondhand bookshelf, filled it with books I'd always meant to read. I painted the living room wall a deep navy blue, something bold that made the place feel mine. On Sundays, instead of dragging myself through chores, I'd cook. Real meals, not just reheated leftovers. I'd put music on, dance around the kitchen, laugh at myself. For the first time, the apartment started to feel alive. The more I invested in myself, the less space my family's voices took up in my head. Their silence, which had once felt like punishment, started to feel like freedom. No more endless guilt trips. No more being compared to Jason at every turn. Just me, my choices, my pace. But life has a way of testing you right when you think you're steady. It started with a text from my sister. "Heard you're doing well at work. Don't forget who's been there for you." No congratulations. Just a subtle reminder that, in her mind, my success was somehow owed to her. Then Mom called, her voice dripping with that faux sweetness I knew so well. "Brian, your uncle says he might help you out, maybe get you into a better job. But he'd need to know you're serious about the family. About the apartment." I didn't even flinch this time. "I'm doing fine on my own," I said, and I hung up before she could start the lecture. That moment, small as it seems, was a turning point. Because for the first time, I didn't feel guilty. I didn't second-guess myself. I felt strong, like the chains they'd always wrapped around me had loosened just a little more. And then, almost out of nowhere, things began to fall into place. The project I was leading at work took off. My team hit deadlines early, clients were happy, and my manager called me into her office with a smile. "Brian, I think it's time we talked about a formal promotion." I walked out of that office buzzing. It wasn't just the title or the pay raise, though both were huge for me. It was the validation that didn't come from family, but from my own effort, my own growth. It was proof that I could thrive without them. With the promotion came a better paycheck. I started putting money into savings again, not just scraping by. I paid off a lingering credit card debt, then treated myself to something I never thought I'd have the nerve to buy. A sleek new laptop, the kind I'd always admired but never justified. Sitting at my desk that night, typing on keys that didn't stick, I felt a surge of pride. Not because it was expensive, but because it was mine. Bought with money I earned, with no one else's strings attached. Even my social life shifted. Without the constant weight of my family's judgment, I found myself opening up more. I joined a trivia night at a local bar, something I'd always been too anxious to do. I made a couple of friends who liked hiking, and soon my weekends weren't just about catching up on sleep. They were about climbing trails, breathing fresh air, laughing with people who actually wanted me around. All the while, I kept writing in that notebook. At first it was just personal goals, but over time, it turned into something bigger. A record of my progress. A reminder of how far I'd come from that night of cold pizzas and an empty apartment. And, slowly, it began to turn into strategy. Because while I was rising, my family wasn't done circling. I could feel it in their occasional texts, their half-hearted attempts to pull me back in. But now, I wasn't scared of them anymore. I wasn't desperate for their approval. If they wanted to play games, I was ready. One evening, after a long day at work and a satisfying run, I sat on my balcony with a cup of tea and watched the sun set over the city. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like I was surviving. I felt like I was living. And somewhere deep inside, a quiet certainty began to grow. They had underestimated me. If they thought they could push me into submission, they were about to find out just how much stronger I had become. The rise gave me breathing room. For the first time in my life, I wasn't running on fumes. I had money set aside, a promotion at work, a few real friends who didn't treat me like a background character. But most importantly, I had clarity. I could finally see my family's tactics for what they were: patterns of control disguised as love, obligation wrapped in guilt. And when you see the strings, you can start cutting them. It started small. One evening, I was scrolling online when I stumbled across an article about property rights and ownership. I had never thought much about the legal side of things before. I figured once I signed the deed, that was that. But this article talked about how common it is for family disputes to end up in court. Siblings fighting over houses, uncles trying to hold property for safekeeping. It sounded exactly like the nonsense my family had been pulling. So I started researching. Not just casual Googling, but deep dives into forums, government sites, even videos from lawyers breaking down worst-case scenarios. I learned about fraudulent transfer claims, the importance of notarized documents, and, most importantly, how to protect your property from being contested. I even found a local law firm that offered free consultations. Out of curiosity, I booked one. Sitting across from the attorney in his crisp gray suit, I laid it all out. The skipped housewarming, the pressure to sign the deed over, the break-in. He listened quietly, hands steepled, then leaned back in his chair. "Brian, let me be blunt. You have nothing to worry about as long as you don't willingly sign anything. The deed is in your name. Your rights are protected. They could scream until their voices go hoarse, but they can't take this apartment from you unless you hand it to them." Relief washed over me, but then he added something that made my stomach tighten. "That said, families like this often rely less on law and more on pressure. Emotional manipulation. Smear campaigns. If they feel entitled enough, they'll find other ways to make your life miserable until you give in." I left the office with two things: certainty that I wasn't crazy for feeling threatened, and the seed of an idea. If my family wanted to treat me like a pawn, then maybe it was time I learned how to play chess. The next few months became a quiet transformation. Outwardly, I kept my head down, still polite when they called, still neutral in the group chat. But underneath, I was building. I funneled extra savings into an emergency account under a different bank, one my family didn't know about. I updated my will, not because I had much, but because it felt symbolic, proof that my decisions were mine alone. At work, the promotion turned into something bigger. My manager pushed me into a leadership training program, the kind that came with networking opportunities. I found myself in rooms with people who weren't just coworkers, but potential allies. People who saw me as Brian, not the selfish one. It was empowering to be valued for my skills rather than my silence. And then came the unexpected stroke of luck. One of the friends I'd met through trivia nights, Alex, turned out to work in real estate. Over beers one night, I vented a little about my family's obsession with my apartment. He laughed and said, "They're wasting their time. But hey, if you really want to throw them off, there are ways. Ever thought about putting your place into an LLC?" I blinked. An LLC? Like a company? Exactly. People do it all the time for rental properties. It separates your personal assets from the property. Legally, it becomes its own entity. Your family wouldn't even know how to touch it without jumping through 10 layers of hoops. That idea lodged itself in my brain and refused to leave. Over the next week, I researched every angle of it. It wasn't cheap, but it was doable. And more than that, it was elegant. My family thought they were circling prey, but in reality, the walls were already going up. In parallel, I started keeping records. Screenshots of texts where they hinted at taking the apartment. Notes about every call, every comment. Copies of the note my uncle had left on my door. At first, I did it just for my own peace of mind. But soon I realized it was ammunition. If things ever escalated, I wouldn't just be defending myself. I'd have proof of their schemes. Of course, my family didn't know any of this. To them, I was still the quiet Brian they could push around. They proved it one Sunday when my mom called, her tone sharp. "We're having dinner at Jason's tonight. Come. We need to talk about the apartment again." I went, not because I wanted to, but because I needed to see their faces to remind myself of what I was up against. As soon as I walked in, it was the same routine. Jason's kids running around, everyone praising him for some new work project, my mom beaming like he hung the moon. I sat at the corner of the table, silent, until my uncle cleared his throat. "So, Brian," he said, too loud, making sure everyone heard. "Have you come to your senses yet? Ready to do what's right for the family?" All eyes turned to me. I could feel the weight of their stares, the anticipation of my surrender. I smiled. Not the nervous, shaky smile they were used to, but something steadier. "I'm still thinking about it," I said calmly. Murmurs rippled around the table. My mom looked relieved, my sister smirked, and my uncle leaned back with a satisfied nod. They thought they were winning. But inside, I was already steps ahead. That night, as I drove home, their voices faded into the background of my thoughts. All I could hear was the echo of the lawyer's words. "As long as you don't sign anything, they can't take it from you." And Alex's advice about the LLC. And my own growing certainty that if my family wanted a game, I was finally ready to play. By the time I pulled into my parking spot, the plan was forming. Protect my apartment legally. Build my independence financially. Collect evidence quietly. And when the time was right, when they least expected it, show them just how powerless they really were. Because for the first time in my life, I wasn't just reacting. I was preparing. And something told me, deep in my gut, that the moment to act was coming sooner than I thought. When I say the shift was quiet, I mean it. Nobody in my family noticed it happening, because they never looked close enough to notice me in the first place. That's what gave me the advantage. They were too busy congratulating Jason, too busy scheming behind my back, to see that I was no longer the same Brian they thought they could guilt into submission. The LLC was the first real move. I sat in Alex's office one Thursday afternoon, signing papers with a steady hand. By the time we were finished, the apartment was no longer legally under Brian, the selfish son. It belonged to a separate entity, one shielded from family meddling. I was the sole owner of that entity, of course, but anyone trying to mess with it would run into a wall of paperwork and legal protection. Just like that, my sanctuary was fortified. The next step was patience. I didn't rush. I let them think they were still circling me, still wearing me down. Mom would call with her usual guilt trips. "Your uncle worries about you, Brian. Don't be ungrateful." My sister would text late at night. "I'll need the spare key soon. We'll figure it out." And uncle, always with that smug confidence, would corner me at family dinners with, "So, when's the big handover?" Every time, I kept my responses vague. Non-committal. A nod here, a maybe there. Enough to keep them comfortable, to let them believe I was on the brink of giving in. But behind the scenes, I was setting the stage. I had been collecting evidence for months, screenshots, notes, even a recording or two when they slipped up and said too much. I wasn't planning to go to court unless I had to, but I wanted the insurance. More importantly, I started reaching out to people outside the family, the very people they always underestimated. My boss, who saw my work ethic firsthand. My new friends, who knew me as the guy who actually showed up and cared. Even Alex, who promised he'd back me if I ever needed a legal witness. For the first time, I was building a network not based on blood, but on respect. The opportunity came sooner than expected. My uncle decided to throw what he called a family meeting, not at his house, but at mine. He didn't even ask. One Friday evening, I came home to find half my family standing in the hallway outside my door. Mom was holding a casserole dish, like this was some kind of celebration. "Open up, Brian," Uncle said with that same commanding tone. "We need to talk inside." I stood there for a moment, keys in hand, heart pounding. Then I smiled, calm, collected, and unlocked the door. "Sure, come in." They filed inside, chattering like it was already theirs. My sister tossed her jacket on my couch. Mom set the casserole on the counter, and Uncle clapped me on the back. "Smart choice, Brian. You'll see, this is for the best." I didn't argue. I let them sit, let them pour drinks, let them feel comfortable. Then, when everyone was settled, Uncle leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "So, the deed. Let's finalize this." The room fell silent. All eyes turned to me. I took a deep breath, pulled a folder from my backpack, and set it on the table. Their faces lit up. They thought it was the paperwork they'd been waiting for. But when Uncle opened it, his smile faltered. Instead of a deed, he found a neatly organized packet, screenshots of texts, printed emails, notes about every time they pressured me. At the very top was a copy of the LLC certificate, the official seal gleaming under the light. "What is this?" he demanded, voice sharp. I leaned back in my chair, meeting his glare with steady calm. "This," I said, "is proof that this apartment doesn't belong to Brian. It belongs to an LLC. Legally protected. Untouchable. Which means none of you have any claim to it. Not now, not ever." Murmurs erupted. My sister scoffed. Mom's face went pale, and Uncle's jaw tightened. "You can't be serious," Mom said, her voice trembling. "I'm very serious," I replied. "Every time you pressured me, every note you left, every suggestion to hand it over, I documented it. If you push any further, I'll make sure the right people see this file. And trust me, they won't be kind to a family trying to strong-arm their own son." For once, the room was silent. Truly silent. Uncle slammed the folder shut and stood. "You think you're clever, boy? You think you can turn on your family like this?" I didn't raise my voice. I didn't flinch. I just looked him in the eye and said, "No, I'm not turning on my family. I'm protecting myself from people who stopped acting like family a long time ago." That line hung in the air, heavy and sharp. Mom tried to salvage it, her voice breaking. "Brian, don't do this. You're tearing us apart." I shook my head. "No, Mom. You did that when you skipped my housewarming for Jason's barbecue. When you called me selfish for wanting to live in the apartment I worked for. When you broke in with a spare key to plan my eviction. I didn't tear this family apart. You did." I stood, walked to the door, and opened it wide. "Now get out." One by one, they filed out, some muttering under their breath, others silent. My sister shot me a look of pure venom. Uncle paused at the threshold, leaning close enough that only I could hear. "You'll regret this, Brian. Blood is blood. You can't cut us off forever." I didn't reply. I just closed the door behind him, the click of the lock sounding final. For the first time in months, maybe years, I felt a rush of calm. Not happiness, yet, but calm. I had faced them, looked them in the eye, and drawn a line they couldn't cross. What I didn't know then was that this wasn't the end of it. They weren't going to accept defeat gracefully. Their next move would test me in ways I hadn't anticipated. But as I sat at my kitchen table that night, staring at the folder of evidence and the LLC certificate, one thought kept circling in my mind. For the first time, the power was mine. Fallout has a way of creeping up slowly, like cracks in a wall you don't notice until the plaster starts to crumble. For a few days after I threw them out of my apartment, things were eerily quiet. No calls, no texts. The family group chat went dead, which almost made me laugh. These were the same people who once spammed it with barbecue photos and passive-aggressive memes about selfish kids. I thought maybe they had finally gotten the message. Maybe silence was their way of licking wounds, regrouping. But my family wasn't built to accept boundaries. They were built to test them. The first blowback came from my sister. She posted a long, dramatic rant on Facebook, public, of course, about how some people think they're better than family just because they have a tiny apartment. She painted me as a cold, selfish brother who wouldn't even open his home when she needed stability. She ended it with, "Blood is forever." Some people forget that until it's too late. Comments poured in from her friends, people who didn't know me, calling me heartless. But then something unexpected happened. People who did know me started chiming in. A coworker of mine left a simple comment. "This isn't the whole story." Another person who'd seen my sister's entitled behavior at family events hinted that maybe I had my reasons. Slowly, the tone shifted. My sister deleted the post within hours, but the damage to her credibility lingered. Then came my mom. She called in tears one evening, her voice shaking. "Brian, you embarrassed us. You humiliated your uncle in front of everyone. Do you know how hard it is for me to show my face at church after what you did?" I listened quietly, letting her words wash over me. There was a time when this would have gutted me, when guilt would have gnawed at me until I apologized just to make the feeling stop. But now I saw it for what it was, another manipulation. "Mom," I said calmly, "I didn't humiliate anyone. They did that to themselves when they tried to steal my apartment. And if church people are judging you, maybe tell them the whole story." She went silent. For once, She had no comeback. But the true fallout came with my uncle. A week after that confrontation, I got a letter in the mail. Not handwritten, official. His lawyer. My hands shook as I tore it open, scanning the pages. It was a cease and desist of sorts, claiming that I had defamed him by suggesting he was trying to steal my property. My heart raced at first, panic flooding in. Was this it? Was he really going to drag me into court? But then I remembered the folder. The screenshots, the notes, the LLC certificate. I called the same lawyer who had given me that first free consultation, sent him the packet, and waited. 2 days later, he called me back with a chuckle. Brian, this isn't going anywhere. If anything, this letter proves he's scrambling. You're protected. If he pushes, we'll counterclaim. And trust me, you've got more than enough evidence to bury him. It never went to court. The letter was the last gasp of a man who realized the game was up. My uncle went quiet after that, his bluster deflated. I heard through the grapevine that he had ranted to a few cousins about me being ungrateful and disrespectful, but no one took him seriously anymore. He had overplayed his hand. Jason, my golden boy cousin, kept hosting barbecues, but they weren't the same. A friend who still attended family gatherings told me that the energy had shifted. People whispered about the apartment scandal. Some relatives started asking questions, wondering why I was being targeted in the first place. And with every retelling, the truth leaked out, that I wasn't selfish, just fed up. That my uncle and mom had tried to corner me and failed. The pedestal Jason had been standing on started to wobble. My achievements at work, the independence I'd built, the way I carried myself differently. It all began to contrast with his endless parties and shallow charm. The comparisons flipped, quietly but steadily. For once, I wasn't the disappointment. I was the one who had stood his ground. And the best part? I didn't have to fight anymore. The revenge wasn't a dramatic explosion. It was a quiet dismantling. A shift in power. They had tried to strip me of my dignity, my home, my autonomy, and instead, they ended up exposing themselves. Months passed. I stopped checking the group chat entirely. Holidays came and went without invitations. At first, the silence stung, but then I realized it was peace. Real peace. I spent Thanksgiving with friends who laughed with me, not at me. I celebrated Christmas in my apartment, decorating it with lights and cooking a meal I actually enjoyed eating. On New Year's Eve, I stood on my balcony with a glass of champagne, watching the city light up, and I felt something I hadn't felt in years: freedom. One evening, I found myself sorting through old mail and came across the spare key I had once given my mom. The sight of it made my chest tighten. That little piece of metal had been the symbol of trust, and they had used it to betray me. I walked it down to the building's dumpster, tossed it in, and felt a weight lift from my shoulders as it clanged against the bottom. The final nail in the coffin came not from me, but from them. My dad, who had stayed mostly silent throughout, called one night. His voice was quieter than I remembered. "Brian," he said, "your mom's upset. Your uncle's still angry. But I think you did the right thing." It floored me. For years, he had been the silent partner in their manipulation, nodding along, never standing up for me. And now, here he was, admitting it. "You worked for that apartment," he continued. "It's yours. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise." We didn't talk long, but when I hung up, I sat in the dark for a while, letting the words sink in. Maybe he would never say it publicly. Maybe he'd never stand up to mom outright. But for once, I had his acknowledgement, and it was enough. Looking back, the revenge wasn't in legal threats or dramatic speeches. It was in reclaiming myself, in drawing the line so firmly that they couldn't cross it without consequences, in showing them that the quiet son, the easy one, the selfish one, had more strength than they ever imagined. The fallout left scars, sure. I don't pretend otherwise. But it also left space for growth, for peace, for a life defined on my terms. And every time I unlock my apartment door, walk into the home I built with my own sweat and sacrifice, I feel the quiet satisfaction of knowing this. They tried to take everything from me, but in the end, I took back everything that mattered. And I'll never let them touch it again. My name is Gavin, and I'm 33 years old. If you had told me 5 years ago that my own family would one day try to kick me out of the house my grandparents left me, without so much as a warning or an ounce of shame, I probably would have laughed it off. We were never the Brady Bunch, but I didn't think we were the kind of people who would stage a fake eviction over brunch. Turns out, I severely overestimated both their loyalty and their intelligence. The house I live in isn't just a house. It's the one constant in my life that ever felt safe. My grandparents raised me here from the time I was 10. My dad took off before I was born, and my mom, well, she was always around, but never really there. She liked to pop in for birthdays and Christmas, sometimes with a new boyfriend or dramatic story about why she couldn't stay long. But my grandparents? They were steady, loving, predictable in the best way. When they passed, Grandpa first, then Grandma a year later, I was devastated. Losing them was like losing the only real family I had. But they left me the house and a $1.2 million inheritance, split between liquid assets, bonds, and a few stocks I couldn't pronounce, let alone understand. I remember sitting in the lawyer's office feeling like a fraud, wearing a wrinkled button-up and trying to make sense of words like beneficiary and disbursement. What I did understand was that Grandma and Grandpa wanted me to be okay. And for once, I finally was. But peace is rarely permanent when you have a family like mine. The money wasn't something I advertised. I'd always been the quiet one, the background kid at family events, and I wanted to keep it that way. I paid off the house, moved everything into a private trust on my lawyer's advice, and started living modestly. I still drove my beat-up 2011 Civic, still wore the same 3 jackets I'd had since college, and still clipped coupons out of habit. Maybe that's why they thought I was vulnerable. Like I didn't know how the game worked. It started subtly. My brother, Shane, 4 years younger, louder, always acting like he was auditioning for a reality show, started checking in more often. He'd stop by unannounced, poke around the living room, and make casual comments like, "This place could be worth a fortune, huh? Or you ever think about downsizing?" Once, I caught him taking pictures of the kitchen and texting someone, but when I asked about it, he waved me off and said he was helping a friend who wanted ideas for a remodel. I didn't push. That's always been my weakness. I let things slide. I give people too much benefit of the doubt. But something felt off. Then Mom started coming around again. She hadn't visited the house in over 2 years, but suddenly she was stopping by with casseroles and fake smiles, saying things like, "I miss the old days. This house just feels like home, doesn't it?" She even offered to help decorate, which, if you knew my mom, was code for throwing out anything sentimental and replacing it with glass furniture and scented candles shaped like seashells. I kept my responses polite but distant. "Thanks, but I've got it covered." "No need, but I appreciate it." Still, they kept pushing. Shane started asking if I'd ever gotten around to updating the deed, an oddly specific question for someone who barely graduated high school and once tried to claim you could use your Costco card as ID. It was a Tuesday morning when everything shifted. I had just come back from my usual jog, same route, same time, earbuds in, ignoring the world. When I got back to the house, I noticed a car I didn't recognize parked at the curb. Black SUV, tinted windows, New York plates. I walked up the driveway and saw Shane standing there with Mom, both of them dressed a little too formally for a surprise visit. She wore a long beige coat and carried a manila envelope, like she thought this was a scene in a courtroom drama. Shane just looked smug, the kind of smirk he used to wear in high school right before snitching on someone to the principal. "Morning," I said cautiously, brushing sweat off my forehead. "Gavin," Mom said, tone dripping with fake warmth. "We were just in the neighborhood and thought we'd swing by." "With a lawyer?" I asked, nodding toward the guy standing beside them, who was now holding out the envelope. "That's irrelevant," Shane cut in. "Look, this is awkward, but it's better we handle this now. We've gone ahead and had the deed transferred. You've got until Friday to pack up." I stared at them for a few seconds, processing. I didn't take the envelope. I didn't say anything. I just looked at both of them. The mother who'd never bothered to come to my high school graduation, and the brother who once pawned our uncle's watch for concert tickets. And I smiled. "You really think I didn't see this coming?" I said quietly. Their faces twitched, just slightly. Shane shifted on his feet. Mom blinked twice like her contact lens had moved. The lawyer stayed quiet, though he looked increasingly unsure of himself. "Gavin, this doesn't have to be ugly," Mom said, slipping into her patronizing tone. "It's just, well, it's a family property. Your grandparents would have wanted all of us to share it." "That's funny," I said, "because I was there when Grandpa told you never to step foot in this house again after you tried to steal from his medicine cabinet." Her expression soured. "That was years ago. And nothing's changed, I replied. They didn't argue much after that. Just told me to be out by Friday, as if it were already done. As if I wouldn't fight back. As if they hadn't just made the biggest mistake of their lives. The moment they left, I called my attorney. We'd been preparing for this possibility for months. I hadn't said anything to my family, of course. I didn't even tell my friends. But when Shane started sniffing around the deed and Mom started visiting unannounced, I knew it was only a matter of time. So I worked quietly, filed the right paperwork, transferred ownership of the house into a private trust, and ensured that not only was the property legally protected, but that any attempt to claim or transfer it without my authorization would be considered a legal violation. Which is exactly what they'd just done. I spent the next 2 days in quiet anticipation. I didn't confront them. I didn't send any warnings. I just waited. And on Thursday morning, right around 9 a.m., they came back with a moving truck. Shane stepped out of the passenger seat wearing sunglasses, clearly trying to channel some kind of smug power move. Mom followed behind, speaking animatedly to the movers, probably explaining how her family had always owned the place. But they all froze when they reached the driveway, because standing there, calm, collected, arms folded, was my attorney. And he wasn't alone. He had 2 uniformed officers with him, both holding clipboards. My attorney, Mr. Randall, was a quiet, sharp-eyed man in his 50s who rarely raised his voice, but always made people listen. He gave Shane and Mom a brief nod, like he might to someone he barely remembered from a high school reunion, then calmly stepped forward and handed a thick packet of papers to the so-called lawyer my family had dragged in. "Good morning," Mr. Randall said coolly. "You are in violation of Civil Statute 83.041 regarding unauthorized transfer of trust-protected property. This house is not, nor has it ever been, within your legal right to claim, transfer, or occupy." Shane's smirk cracked first. "What are you talking about?" he snapped, taking a step forward. "We filed the paperwork. It's done." Mr. Randall didn't even blink. "Incorrect. What you submitted was a fraudulent transfer form, signed with a forged authorization. We've already flagged it with the county records office and filed an emergency injunction. As of this moment, any attempt to step foot onto this property with intent to take possession is considered trespassing. And given that you've involved third-party movers, that could extend to charges of attempted unlawful eviction." The movers looked very uncomfortable now. One of them, a tall guy with tattoos on both forearms, slowly backed away from the truck and muttered, "We're out, man. We don't deal with legal drama." Within 30 seconds, both movers were back in the truck, reversing down the driveway like it was on fire. I stood on the porch with my arms crossed, watching the scene unfold. I hadn't said a word yet. I didn't need to. I'd already played my part. This moment was for them to absorb, and I wasn't about to take it away from them. Mom, realizing her little scheme had just collapsed like a wet paper bag, tried switching tactics. "Gavin, honey, let's not blow this out of proportion," she said, her voice sugar-coated with fake concern. "We just thought, well, you've got the place all to yourself, and it felt like time to share the family legacy. You don't even use half the rooms." I tilted my head. "Is that why you try to steal it?" "It wasn't stealing," she insisted. "It was just a misunderstanding." Mr. Randall cut in again, this time pulling out a second folder and handing it to the officer beside him. "This document outlines the emergency protective order and injunction filed against Mrs. Evelyn Maynard and Mr. Shane Maynard. The judge signed it this morning. You are both legally barred from approaching this property, contacting Mr. Gavin Maynard in relation to the estate, or attempting any further property claims. Any violation of these terms will result in immediate arrest." "You've got to be kidding me," Shane growled. "We're family. You can't just lock us out." "Family doesn't mean free pass," I said, finally speaking. "You tried to throw me out of the house I grew up in, because you thought I'd be too stupid or soft to stop you." He took a step closer. "This isn't over." The officer moved between us immediately, holding up a hand. "Step back, sir. This is your only warning." Shane glared at me, then at Randall, then at the house. I could see the gears in his head turning, but there wasn't anything left to grab. He had no leverage, no plan B, just a bruised ego and a whole lot of paperwork working against him. They left a few minutes later, but not before Mom turned around one last time on the front steps. "You think you're so clever," she hissed. "But when you're old and alone in that big, empty house, don't come crawling back." I didn't respond. I didn't need to. She wanted a reaction, and I wasn't about to give her one. Instead, I stood there silently until their car disappeared down the street. Then I exhaled. It wasn't just relief. It was something deeper. Vindication, maybe. The kind you only feel when you've been underestimated your whole life and finally get to say, without words, you were wrong about me. Back inside, the house was quiet again. Still. Safe. I sat on the living room couch. Grandpa's old recliner in the corner still looked the same, and let it all sink in. The months of preparation, the years of swallowing insults, being treated like the spare son, the invisible one, and now this. But I knew it wasn't over yet. You see, while they were busy trying to steal the house, they forgot something more important: the money. And that part of the plan was just getting started. The thing about people like Shane and my mom is that they assume silence equals weakness. That if you're not loud, you're not dangerous. If you're not confrontational, you're easy to beat. What they didn't realize, what they never realized, is that staying quiet doesn't mean I wasn't paying attention. I've been taking notes for years. After they drove off, I didn't celebrate. I didn't gloat. I just got back to work. The house was secure, the injunction was in place, and now it was time to make sure they couldn't come after anything else. Because I knew them. Losing the house wasn't going to stop them. They'd just shift focus. The inheritance, the accounts, anything with a dollar sign on it. They didn't care about the home, not really. They cared about what it represented: leverage, control, a way to make me feel small again. And I wasn't giving them another inch. That night, I opened a locked drawer in my home office and pulled out a red binder. Inside were printouts, receipts, letters, and emails I'd kept over the years. Most people would have tossed them in the trash. Passive-aggressive birthday cards with guilt-tripping messages, emails with urgent requests for small loans, and texts from Shane full of backhanded compliments like, "Must be nice not to have real responsibilities." I had everything. Even screenshots of a family group chat I was never supposed to see. One where Shane joked that I was basically a walking ATM with no spine. That one stuck with me. I also had bank statements, ones that showed where small amounts of money had been accidentally pulled from one joint account I had with Mom before I wised up and closed it. She'd brushed it off as a mix-up at the time, said she forgot. She wasn't authorized to use it anymore. But it wasn't a mistake. It was a test. She wanted to see if I'd push back. And when I didn't, she took that as permission to keep trying. But now, I had the paper trail. And more importantly, I had a plan. The next morning, I called Mr. Randall again. He didn't even sound surprised. "I figured you'd follow up," he said. "I assume you're ready to take the gloves off." "Completely," I said. "Let's start with asset shielding. Everything." We spent the next 2 hours on the phone. Step by step, we moved through the checklist. Every asset, real estate, stocks, bank accounts, digital investments, got moved under the trust umbrella. We closed out my old checking account and opened a new one with a new bank in another state under the name of the trust. I authorized only myself and Mr. Randall to access anything over $500. It felt paranoid, sure, but I wasn't about to be blindsided again. Then came the good part. See, most people assume trust funds are just a way for rich people to avoid taxes. And sure, that's part of it. But they can do a lot more, like protect you from lawsuits, or allow you to create stipulations on inheritance. That afternoon, I made my first change to the family trust that had been passed down from my grandparents. I removed my mother and my brother as contingent beneficiaries. Permanently. They'd always assumed that once I was gone, whenever that might be, they'd swoop in and collect what was left. That I'd get old, or sick, or make a mistake, and they'd be right there to pick the bones clean. But not anymore. Now, if anything happened to me, the estate would go directly to 2 children's hospitals and a nonprofit legal defense fund my grandfather supported for veterans. I knew it would have made him proud. But I wasn't done. There was one more thing, one card I hadn't played yet. I mentioned earlier that Shane had a habit of running his mouth. Well, one of his worst decisions was bragging to a friend about how he was getting the house soon, how he'd already been in talks with a shady real estate contact about flipping it. What Shane didn't know was that the guy he was bragging to, he owed me a favor, a big one. A week prior to the whole confrontation, I asked that friend, let's call him Jason, to casually record a few of their conversations, just in case things escalated. Jason wasn't exactly thrilled about it, But after I reminded him about the time I paid off the remainder of his student loans without asking for anything in return, he agreed. What Jason gave me was gold. In one audio clip, Shane was heard saying, "He's clueless, man. Like, he just sits in that house all day like a retired librarian. Mom and I are just gonna get the deed flipped, and then we'll rent the place until we sell it. We'll offer him a few grand to leave if he makes a fuss. Worst case, we fake some overdue taxes or unpaid repairs. People like him. They fold. People like him." I saved the recording on 3 different devices and sent it to Mr. Randall with the subject line, Exhibit A, Proof of Intent. By Friday, we'd filed paperwork to begin a preemptive civil case, not just against Shane, but against Mom as well. Fraud. Attempted unlawful seizure of assets. Potential conspiracy to commit real estate fraud. And depending on how generous the judge felt, identity theft too. But that's when something unexpected happened. Late Saturday night, I got a knock on my door. Not loud, not urgent, just 2 soft taps. I checked the camera feed on my phone and saw Mom standing alone on the porch, arms crossed, looking like she'd aged 10 years in a week. No Shane, no smugness. Just her, wearing that same beige coat, makeup faded, eyes puffy. I didn't open the door. She knocked again, then stepped back and looked up at the camera. "Please, Gavin. Just talk to me." I didn't move. "I didn't know Shane would take it this far," she said. I thought maybe we could work something out. As a family." That word again. Family. Always tossed around when they needed something. She sniffled. "I just don't want to lose everything. I messed up. Okay, I messed up. But you've got to understand, things haven't been easy for me either. You were always the favorite. You got the house, the money, the love. I just wanted a piece of it. Something." There it was. The truth, raw and ugly. But I didn't open the door. Because as much as I wanted to believe that somewhere in her was the mom I used to imagine she'd become, the woman in front of me wasn't here for redemption. She was here because she'd been caught. And I knew better than to let her back in. Not this time. So I stood there quietly, watching through the glass as she waited, and then slowly walked away. And that's when I made the final decision. The one move that would make this entire game end on my terms. I made the final decision that Sunday morning, just as the sun was creeping over the edge of the porch and casting golden light across the hallway rug, one my grandmother had made by hand. The same one Shane once spilled a beer on and laughed about. I remember kneeling beside it, tracing the stitches, and knowing what I had to do. Enough was enough. I wasn't going to keep playing defense. They tried to steal my home, humiliate me, use me like a living piggy bank, and now my mother was showing up at my door with some half-hearted apology disguised as guilt. No, that wasn't remorse. That was fear. Fear of what came next. And I made sure she was right to be afraid. The next day, Mr. Randall and I filed the full civil suit. We weren't bluffing anymore. We were pursuing every charge the law would allow. Attempted fraud, unauthorized deed transfer, forgery, identity misrepresentation. It helped that the notary who had signed off on the forged deed no longer worked at the agency listed, and we had confirmation they hadn't been practicing in months. Even the clerk from the county records office gave us a written statement describing the inconsistencies in their filing. We also subpoenaed Shane's phone records and pulled messages from the cloud backups Jason had helped me access. There were chats between Shane and a third party discussing ways to make Gavin leave, including forged repair notices and lies about code violations. In one, Shane even suggested planting pests in the attic and calling the city anonymously. That one made my stomach turn. All of it went to the judge in a massive file Randall titled Maynard versus Maynard and Associates. Because yes, Shane had actually formed an LLC 2 months prior under the name Legacy Family Holdings, with himself as CEO and Mom as the treasurer. They had been that confident. 3 weeks after the lawsuit was filed, I got an envelope in the mail from Shane's lawyer, different from the one who'd been at the house. This one had the nervous, apologetic energy of someone who knew they were trying to salvage a lost cause. Inside was a 5-paragraph letter, mostly legal fluff, but the key message was this. My client is willing to cease all further claims to the property and inheritance in exchange for a mutual agreement to drop the civil charges. We hope to resolve this amicably. I didn't even finish reading it before sending it to Randall with one line. Let them swing. We declined the offer. Politely, but firmly. And that's when everything started to crumble. First, Shane lost his job. His employer had been contacted by the attorney representing the real estate firm that almost got involved in flipping my house. Turns out they didn't like being tied to a potential fraud case and pulled their funding from Shane's LLC, which was already bleeding money. Then came the investigation into his company's finances. Turns out he hadn't just planned to flip my house. He'd already accepted investments from 3 silent partners, promising them a percentage of the resale. When they found out the entire plan had been based on a forged deed and fake transfer, they sued him for breach of contract and misrepresentation. The combined lawsuits were enough to put him in 6-figure debt. And Mom, well, things didn't go much better for her. When the charges came through officially, she was forced to lawyer up. Her accounts were frozen pending review of any suspicious withdrawals from past joint assets we'd once shared. She had to cash out her savings to pay the attorney fees. The same woman who once laughed about my frugal ways was suddenly trying to sell her car for half its value on Facebook Marketplace. But the part that stayed with me the most, more than the lawsuits, the injunctions, the loss of their reputations, was the letter. About 2 months after the case started moving through court, I got a handwritten envelope in the mail. No return address. Inside was a folded piece of notebook paper, shaky handwriting, written in black ink. It was from my mom. Dear Gavin, they say the things you regret most are the ones you never say. I don't know if that's true, but I do know I've said a lot of things I should have never said, and not said a lot of things I should have. Maybe you won't read this. Maybe it doesn't matter anymore. But I need to try. I was a terrible mother. Not just now. Not just because of what I did with the house. I've failed you in ways that will take a lifetime for me to even fully understand. I let you grow up thinking you didn't matter. I let Shane treat you like a punching bag and pretended it was just sibling stuff. I spent more time chasing men than raising my own son. And then you got older and smarter and successful, and I felt small. Less. You were everything I could have been, and instead of being proud, I got bitter. I let that bitterness grow. I let it twist into something that hurt you. I let Shane rope me into something I knew was wrong because I thought, deep down, you wouldn't fight back. But you did. You stood up for yourself in a way I never taught you to. You protected what was yours. You did what I never had the courage to do. And I'm sorry. Maybe that doesn't fix anything. I don't expect forgiveness. But I do hope, someday, you'll remember that I was human and broken and full of guilt even when I didn't show it. Love, Mom. I sat with that letter for a long time. I didn't cry. I didn't smile. I just let it sit there, open on the table, soaking in the weight of it all. Did I believe her? Maybe. Part of me did. Another part remembered that she only ever apologized when she had something to lose. But in that moment, it didn't matter. Because whether the apology was sincere or not, I finally understood that I wasn't responsible for her redemption. That was on her. I was done cleaning up their messes. Done trying to earn affection from people who only saw value in me when it was attached to a dollar sign. So I took the letter, folded it neatly, and placed it in the same red binder with the rest of the case records. Not to forget, but to remember how far I'd come. 6 months later, the civil suit closed in my favor. The judge ruled that both Shane and my mother had willfully and knowingly engaged in fraudulent behavior, and neither could make any future claims against me or the estate. Shane was ordered to pay restitution, and while I'll probably never see the full amount, it wasn't about the money. It was about the principle. I used a portion of the trust funds to set up a scholarship in my grandparents' name, dedicated to kids who grew up in unstable homes but found a way to keep going. It felt right. Full circle. And as for the house, it's still mine. Still quiet. Still creaky in all the familiar ways. I walk through it sometimes in the early mornings, barefoot on the hardwood, just listening to the silence. No more threats. No more knocks on the door. Just peace. I still drive the same Civic. Still drink instant coffee some mornings just because I like the taste. Still clip coupons. But I'm not the same man who once let guilt keep him quiet. I've learned that protecting yourself from toxic family isn't betrayal, it's survival. And sometimes, the only way to end a generational pattern is to burn the blueprint and build something better, on your own terms. My name's Julian, I'm 30, and over the years, I've realized that just because someone shares your last name doesn't mean they're on your side. Growing up, my older brother Evan was the golden child. Everything he touched turned to praise. Straight A's? Must be his work ethic. A decent internship? Pure talent. Me? I was the quiet one, the daydreamer, the one still figuring things out. I never resented Evan. Not at first. I figured everyone had their own path, and mine just looked different. But the older we got, the more those small digs turned into full-on jabs, and eventually, open mockery wrapped in polite chuckles at family dinners. And no one, not our parents, not our cousins, ever told him to knock it off. Why would they? He was the success story. The one they bet on. I work in what most of them still call online stuff. I started early, teaching myself about markets, automation, digital revenue models, things you can't exactly show off at Thanksgiving. But it paid off. Slowly. Quietly. I was never flashy. I reinvested, scaled up, lived simply. By 28, I had several automated income streams that pulled in enough to make working for someone else optional. But try explaining yield farming or digital arbitrage to a room full of boomers who still think you're unemployed if you don't wear slacks to a cubicle. My mom once asked me if I needed money because I looked like I had free time. I just smiled and told her I was doing fine. They didn't ask twice. Then came Evan's promotion. He landed a director position at his firm, some mid-tier real estate company, and you'd think he discovered fire. My parents planned a party like it was a wedding. They rented a private room at a rooftop bar downtown, ordered catering, decorations, printed little menus with "Congratulations, Evan," and gold foil. I got an invite like everyone else, complete with a note from Mom. Please be on time and dress sharp. This means a lot to him. I shrugged it off. I didn't mind going. I was happy for him, genuinely. What I didn't expect was how far they'd take it. I showed up in a navy blazer and dress shoes, gift in hand, nothing crazy, just a bottle of vintage bourbon he'd once said he liked. The room was already buzzing. My cousins were clinking glasses, the music was soft jazz, and Evan was right in the middle, grinning like a politician. The man of the hour. He spotted me and waved me over, but not before scanning what I was wearing like he was rating it out of 10. "Hey, Jules," he said, pulling me into a one-arm hug. "Didn't know you owned a blazer." I laughed it off. "Didn't know you owned humility," I joked. He smirked, but it didn't reach his eyes. That set the tone for the night. During the speeches, yes, speeches, my dad actually said, "We're so proud to have raised such a strong, capable man. Evan's the embodiment of hard work paying off." Then my aunt added, "He's the family's real success." Real. I remembered that word like a slap. I glanced around the room. No one flinched. Not even my mom, who just smiled and dabbed her eyes. When the champagne popped, I lifted my glass like everyone else, but the fizz didn't drown out the burn in my throat. After that, things just got worse. The bartender tapped me on the shoulder, handed me a trash bag, and said, "Your brother said you'd help with cleanup. Start with the bottles." I blinked. "Excuse me." But before I could ask again, Evan leaned in from across the bar and said loud enough for others to hear, "Come on, man. Help out a little. It's not like you've got work tomorrow." The table chuckled. I forced a smile and took the bag. As I bent to grab a cluster of empty glasses, one of our uncles muttered, "Nice of him to pitch in." I wasn't sure if he meant it sincerely or sarcastically. At that point, it didn't matter. Later in the evening, after the cake and the toasts, I was leaning near the railing, sipping quietly and watching the skyline. Evan joined me. His Rolex glinted under the patio lights, one of those obnoxiously large ones with a face the size of a coaster. "You know," he said, swirling his drink, "maybe one day you'll get a real job too. Then we can celebrate you properly." His tone was light, but the venom was there. Always was. I didn't react right away. I just sipped my drink, glanced at my own wrist, nothing flashy, just a leather-strapped Seiko I liked for its simplicity. Then I looked him in the eye and said, calm as ever, "I thought about it, but then my lazy money started earning more than you." His smile faltered. "What's that supposed to mean?" he snapped. His voice rose just enough to draw a few looks. "You sitting at home messing with apps or crypto or whatever doesn't make you successful. It makes you a leech." Now that was new. Direct. Unfiltered. I could feel the heat in my chest, but I didn't let it show. Instead, I raised my glass, gave him a toast-worthy nod, and said, "Cheers to the only success here who still needs a boss." That's when things started to shift. His jaw tightened. His fingers clenched around his glass. For once, I saw something flicker in his eyes that looked a lot like doubt. Or fear. But I wasn't done. Not yet. He tried to recover, laughing a little too hard. Right. Because passive income is just code for mooching off the system. Then he stepped closer. "You think this?" He gestured to the party, the guests, the view. "You think any of this just happens? This takes real effort. Real grind. You wouldn't last a week doing what I do." I didn't flinch. You're right, I said. I wouldn't. Because I'd never give up my freedom to climb someone else's ladder. And just then, my dad walked over, catching the tail end. What's going on here? He asked, brow raised. Evan straightened. Nothing, he said quickly. Just talking. But his eyes were still locked on me, and the storm behind them was only just beginning. I could feel it, like a crack in the foundation of something that had been crumbling for years. This wasn't about a promotion. This was about control. Image. Who got to be the favorite? And I just shifted the weight. After that exchange, something in Evan changed. He didn't storm off or raise his voice again, but he wore this tight-lipped smile for the rest of the night, the kind that barely hides a bruise to the ego, the kind of smile that says, I'll deal with you later. I wasn't surprised. Evan had always been the type to collect slights like they were debts. But unlike me, he didn't believe in letting things go quietly. No, Evan believed in settling scores, and he didn't like losing face, especially not in front of family. The next morning, I woke up to a group text from my mom. It was a long, meandering message about tone and how family events should be about support, not showmanship. She didn't mention Evan by name, but it was clear who she was defending. I didn't reply. 10 minutes later, she texted me privately. You embarrassed your brother on a very important night. Was that necessary? I stared at the screen, thumb hovering over the keyboard. Then I locked the phone and placed it face down on my desk. Let her stew. For the next week, I stayed quiet. Didn't post anything, didn't reach out, didn't engage. And that, apparently, drove them insane. On Thursday, my cousin Jordan messaged me out of nowhere. Hey, random question. How do you actually make money? I chuckled. I knew exactly where this was coming from. Evan must have been poking around, trying to figure out how I could afford the lifestyle I had without clocking in. I gave Jordan a vague but polite answer, and that was that. Or so I thought. Friday morning, my accountant emailed me with an alert. Someone had tried accessing the back end of one of my smaller portfolio sites, nothing major, just a branded dropshipping domain I rarely touched anymore. But the IP matched a device from my old hometown, and that narrowed the suspect list significantly. I didn't confront anyone. Not yet. I just changed every password, updated my 2FA, locked down my assets tighter than Fort Knox. But it confirmed what I already suspected. Evan couldn't just let it go. A week later, my mother invited me to brunch. Just us. She said she missed me. I almost didn't go, but curiosity got the better of me. When I arrived, she was already seated at the little bistro downtown, stirring her tea like she was waiting for a confession. Julian, she began before I even sat down. Why do you always have to make everything a competition? I laughed, softly, without humor. Mom, Evan called me a leech at his own party. I didn't start that conversation. She sighed. You know how he gets when he's feeling threatened. Threatened by what? I asked. By someone who didn't follow the script and still came out ahead? She didn't answer. Instead, she changed the subject, asked if I was doing okay financially with that same tilted head concern she'd used when I was 22 and figuring things out. I stared at her. Mom, I said, I make more in a month than Evan makes in a quarter. And I don't have to beg anyone for PTO. Her face froze. Not in anger, but confusion. Like she genuinely didn't know what to do with that information. The following Monday, it happened. I was in the middle of reviewing an investment when I got a flood of notifications, tags, mentions, comments. My LinkedIn was blowing up. Evan had written a long, smarmy post about entrepreneurship myths and fake success stories that relied on luck, timing, and family handouts. He never used my name, but anyone who'd been at that party knew who he was talking about. It was subtle, but cutting. That same day, my cousin, again, Jordan, sent me a screenshot. Yo, your brother really pressed publish on this? The post ended with a smug line. In the real world, we don't toast to algorithms, we earn respect the hard way. I stared at the screen, calm on the outside, but a storm brewing underneath. I wasn't going to respond publicly. That wasn't my style. But I'd been building something quietly for years, something none of them knew about. See, while Evan was climbing his corporate ladder and angling for LinkedIn likes, I'd been investing in local property, quietly acquiring units in our old neighborhood, buying them out from under mismanaged landlords, improving them, then renting them out at fair prices through a business entity with zero connection to my real name. It was something I started not to get rich, but to create stability, a legacy. And the irony? Evan's firm was trying to buy into that same neighborhood. I knew because I'd seen the proposal. They wanted to break ground on a new development, one that would need my parcels to proceed. I wasn't just a leech. I was the landowner, and I had no intention of selling. 3 days later, I got the call. It was a number I didn't recognize, local area code, probably a business line. I almost ignored it, but something told me to pick up. Hello. There was a pause, then a clipped voice. Hi, this is Marlene Roth from Whitestone Realty. We're coordinating a land assembly for a residential project in the Greenpoint district. You're listed as the managing partner for, she paused, likely checking Redway Holdings LLC. We'd like to discuss a buyout offer for your properties on Fletcher Avenue. I leaned back in my chair, smirking. I'd been waiting for this. I kept my voice neutral. I'm listening. She gave me the usual pitch, preliminary numbers, promises of a generous payout, early access to the development's architectural plans, even a vague mention of community benefits. It was all corporate fluff. I let her talk, nodding occasionally, until she dropped the name. The project is being spearheaded by a regional development firm, Sable & Company, if you've heard of them. You'd be working directly with one of their directors, Evan Keller. Ah, there it was. I kept my tone polite. Thank you, Marlene. I'll review the proposal and get back to you. We hung up. The next morning, I declined the offer by email formally, respectfully, and with legal clarity. No counter, no negotiation. Just a straight, not interested in selling. I CC'd my attorney, added my property manager for good measure, and moved on with my day. 12 hours later, Evan called me directly. Julian, he said, his voice low and tight. What are you doing? I played dumb. What do you mean? Don't act stupid. Redway Holdings. That's you? Since when do you own property in Greenpoint? I let the silence stretch. Since you were still buying suits on credit, I said finally. Why? He didn't speak. I imagined him pacing in some sleek glass office, jaw clenched, hands gripping a desk he didn't actually own. Do you understand what you're messing with? He said eventually. This isn't a side hustle, Julian. This is my job. My name's on this proposal. My bonus, my promotion, my department depends on this land deal going through. You're going to block an entire project just to, what? Prove a point. I stood up from my desk and walked to the window, watching the early evening traffic crawl by below. I'm not blocking anything, I said. I'm just not interested in selling. It's nothing personal. He laughed, a short, bitter sound. Don't insult me. You think I don't know what this is about? You're bitter because I called you a leech. I let out a breath. No, Evan, I'm not bitter. I'm just finally in a position where I don't have to tolerate disrespect from people who look down on me. That includes you. You are being petty. No, I said, and my voice sharpened. You're just not used to me having power. This isn't me making a scene at a party. This is business. And if your firm didn't do their homework and realize I control a third of your build site, maybe you should be the one rethinking who the real professional is here. There was silence on the other end. Then, quietly, you could cost me everything. You already cost me everything once, I said. Respect. Dignity. A family that saw me as more than backup talent. Maybe it's your turn. I hung up before he could respond. The fallout was immediate. I didn't hear from him for a week. But the silence didn't mean nothing was happening behind the scenes. My attorney forwarded me a revised offer, nearly double the original. I declined again. Then a third came in, this time with a time-sensitive clause and a personal note from Sable & Company's managing partner. I ignored it entirely. Finally, my dad called. Now that was a surprise. We hadn't had a real conversation in months. Outside of birthdays and holidays, he usually delegated the emotional labor to my mom. But there he was, his name lighting up my phone like a ghost from a simpler time. I answered. Hey, Dad. He didn't even say hello. Julian, what's going on with Evan's project? Straight to it. Why? I asked. He send you to talk me down? He sighed. He's under a lot of pressure. His boss is riding him hard. You know how these things work. I know how leverage works, yeah. There was a long pause. You've made your point, he said, quieter this time. He was out of line. He embarrassed you. But this affects more than just him. It reflects on the family. I felt something tighten in my chest. There it was again, that old weight. The family. The same family that laughed when Evan belittled me. The same family that called him the only success. The same family that handed me a trash bag and told me to help out. You want to talk about reflection? I said, voice barely above a whisper. Then let's talk about what it looked like when your son was mocked in front of 20 people while his parents stayed silent. He started, but I cut him off. I'm not selling, Dad. And if that makes things difficult for Evan, Maybe it's time he learned that not every opportunity gets handed to him. He didn't respond, just exhaled. Then the line went dead. I stood there for a moment, phone in hand, heart pounding not from rage, but from something colder. Final. I had crossed a line I couldn't uncross. I'd broken the unspoken rule. Keep the peace, even if you bleed for it. But peace had always come at my expense. And for once, I wasn't the one bleeding. It was Thanksgiving, the first one I'd agreed to attend in over 2 years. After everything that had happened with the land deal, the LinkedIn post, the calls, the silence, I wasn't planning to go. I figured I'd just send a polite, thanks for the invite, and spend the day quietly with friends. But then I got a voicemail from my grandmother. She's 84, sharp as a tack, and one of the only family members who's never taken sides. "Julian," she said, "you don't have to prove anything to anyone, but I'd really like to see you. Bring a bottle of that wine you always get. I'll save you a seat." So I went. I showed up 15 minutes early with a bottle of red in one hand and a pie in the other. My mom greeted me at the door like nothing had happened, like the last 6 months hadn't set fire to the family dynamic. I gave her a quick hug and a smile that didn't quite reach my eyes. The house smelled like rosemary and baked yams, same as always. A football game was playing on low volume in the living room. And at the far end of the kitchen, Evan was already there, wearing a tight smile and sitting at the head of the table. Next to him was a man in a slate gray suit with slicked back hair and the kind of expensive watch that tried a little too hard. I'd never seen him before, not at any previous gathering, but I knew who he was. Corporate Damage Control. The man stood as I walked in. "Julian Keller? I'm Michael Blackwell. I work with Evan." Of course he did. "Nice to meet you," I said, setting the pie on the counter and shaking his hand. His grip was firm, but his eyes were calculating, measuring. Evan rose slowly. "Glad you could make it. Wouldn't miss Grandma's cranberry sauce," I said. Dinner was strained. Conversation flowed around the table, but never between Evan and me. People asked about work, travel, holidays, but no one brought up the elephant in the room. Not even when Evan's fiancée made a passive-aggressive comment about how hard it is to build something real when people don't cooperate. I just took a sip of my drink. Then Grandma, bless her, looked directly at her and said, "Isn't it interesting how quickly people forget who bought the first bricks in the first place?" Silence. Evan chuckled. "Always a fan of cryptic wisdom, huh, Grandma?" She didn't blink. Wasn't cryptic. Just old enough to say things directly now. After dessert, Michael pulled me aside into the den. He shut the door, lowered his voice. "I'll be honest with you, Julian. Sable and Company is willing to increase the buyout again. 3.5 times market value. That's our final offer. But I think you and I both know it's not about the money." I leaned against the bookshelf, arms folded. "Go on. We've reviewed your portfolio. You've built something impressive. But blocking this project doesn't help you long-term. You're burning a bridge you might need someday." I smiled slightly. "You think I'm worried about access?" Michael mirrored the smile. "I think you're smart enough not to let pride get in the way of strategy." I stepped forward. "And I think your company is used to people folding when you throw big numbers around. But I don't need the money. I don't need the deal. And I definitely don't need Evan's approval. You want to build something on my land, you're going to have to find another route, or wait until I feel like selling. And I don't see either of those happening." Michael looked at me like he wasn't used to hearing no. "So that's it." I nodded. "That's it." Evan was waiting just outside the den when we walked out. He looked at Michael, then at me. "How bad was it?" Michael straightened his cuffs. "Let's just say your brother's not interested in partnership." Evan's jaw clenched. "You're making a mistake, Julian. You've made your point. But this is bigger than some petty contest." "No," I said. "You made it a contest when you called me a leech. When you used me to clean up at your party. When you tried to humiliate me in front of our family, and then again online. You made it personal. I'm just holding the line." He stepped closer. "You're going to regret this." I smiled. "Maybe. But it won't be today." I walked past him, back into the dining room, where Grandma had cleared space for a game of cards. I sat beside her, shuffled the deck, and let the rest of them simmer. The fallout came fast. Without my parcels, the Greenpoint development stalled. Investors backed out. The board started asking questions. Evan was pulled from the project and quietly reassigned. I never saw an announcement, never got a call, but Jordan sent me a screenshot of Evan's LinkedIn months later. The job title had changed. The buzzwords were different. No more talk of leading large-scale urban renewal. Now he was overseeing client outreach. A demotion in everything but name. Word got around. It wasn't just Evan who shifted. My parents, once frosty and dismissive, started texting more often, asking how I was, telling me they were proud of me, though never quite apologizing for how they'd treated me over the years. I didn't push it. I didn't need validation anymore. I'd built a life on my terms, without their approval. As for Evan, we don't talk much. We see each other at the occasional family gathering. He avoids eye contact, sticks to safe topics, and never brings up real estate. The last time we were in the same room, he made a half-hearted joke about how some people don't play well with others. I raised my glass and replied, "Some people don't play fair." He didn't respond. That was fine with me. Because here's the thing. Revenge doesn't always look like fireworks. Sometimes it's just letting people feel the weight of their own choices. Letting them realize that the one they dismissed, the one they mocked, the one they underestimated, was the one who held the cards all along. And the next time someone hands me a trash bag, I'll hand them a business card instead. My name is Caleb, I'm 32, and until a few months ago, I lived a relatively quiet life. I'm not flashy. Never been the type to post expensive dinners or vacation pics. I work in IT, I rent a modest apartment, and I drive an old Toyota that rattles when I go over 50. Most of my money sits quietly in savings, because I've learned that in families like mine, wealth doesn't make you respected, it makes you a target. My Aunt Margot was the only person in my family who really got me. She didn't care that I skipped Christmas parties or forgot birthdays. She called me her little lighthouse, someone quiet and steady in the chaos. When I was younger, she used to bring me art supplies, books, even old laptops just to see what I'd do with them. While the rest of the family rolled their eyes or asked why I was still single, she just smiled and said, "Let him be. He's watching more than he's saying." Margot never married. She didn't have kids. Just 2 nephews, me and my cousin Evan, and a mountain of real estate money from smart investments in the early 2000s. She wore thrifted cardigans and carried the same purse for 10 years, but her bank account would have made most hedge fund managers blush. And she knew exactly what kind of snakes her family was. The cancer came fast. Stage 4 pancreatic. She told me in her garden one evening, sipping weak chamomile tea. "I've got maybe 6 months," she said. "I'd rather spend them pulling weeds than in a hospital bed." I stayed with her more and more after that. Not because she asked, she didn't need to. We'd just sit in silence sometimes. She told me stories I'd never heard, shared recipes she never wrote down, and in one quiet moment, said, "I left you something. Don't tell anyone. Don't even look for it right away. Just trust me." When she passed, the funeral was small. I gave the eulogy. Evan showed up late and left early, muttering something about a meeting in Miami. My mom cried harder than I thought she would, probably because she realized Margot's money wasn't automatically coming her way. The will was read 2 weeks later by her longtime attorney, Mr. Langley, a man who wore cufflinks shaped like chess pawns and spoke like every sentence had already been carefully rehearsed. The family was packed into the conference room like it was a reality show finale. Evan sat there with his leg bouncing, already acting like he was about to inherit the world. My mom whispered prayers under her breath. And then Mr. Langley opened the folder and said, "To my nephew Caleb, I leave the sum of $1 million, held in a private trust account at Bellstone Bank. The details have been provided separately. This is my wish, and I expect it to be honored." Dead silence. You could hear someone's cheap perfume fighting with the air conditioner. My mom blinked. Evan laughed, and then said, "There must be a mistake. Margot always said she'd split everything evenly. You're saying he gets the whole thing?" Mr. Langley didn't even flinch. "That is exactly what I'm saying." Evan stood up, face red. "This is ridiculous. I'm calling my lawyer." "Please do," Mr. Langley replied calmly, closing the folder. "But I'd advise you to read the date on the document first. This was updated 6 weeks before Margot passed, and it's ironclad. You're free to contest it, but I assure you, it won't go well." That night, I didn't celebrate. I didn't buy a car or a plane ticket. I just walked the long way home and thought about all the nights Margot had told me to stay patient. "You don't need to be loud to win," she used to say. "You just need to be ready when the time comes." And I was ready. The next morning, I followed the instructions she left, coded references, familiar phrases, even a dumb inside joke we shared about passwords, and quietly transferred the money into a separate private account. I didn't tell anyone. I didn't even tell my closest friend. I acted like nothing had happened, because I knew Evan wasn't done. Sure enough, last week, he showed up at my place. No call, no text, just knocked like we were close. He was wearing a smug grin and holding a thick manila envelope. "Hey, C," he said, using a nickname he never once used in his life. "Mind if I come in?" I didn't move. "What's that?" "Oh, this." He waved the envelope like it was a pizza menu. "Let's just say the family decided to take care of some unfinished business. We had the will reviewed by a, let's say, more aggressive firm. Turns out, Aunt Margot was confused near the end. They found some documentation that puts things back the way they should have been." I stared at him. He smiled wider. "The million's ours now, bro. But I'm not a monster. I'm thinking we give you, like, 50 grand as a thank you. You know, for being a good sport." I stepped outside and shut the door behind me. "Are you sure about that?" His grin faltered just a bit. "What? Just make sure you're sure. Because once you try to take something that doesn't belong to you, things tend to go sideways fast." He raised an eyebrow and turned without another word. Drove off in his rental Audi with tinted windows and a vanity plate that said Evan wins. 3 days later, I got the alert. Someone had attempted to access the account. Not just access it, empty it. They tried everything. A forged power of attorney. A fake ID in my name. Even some poorly doctored court documents claiming I was mentally unfit to manage my finances. But the second they walked into the branch and tried to execute the transfer, the manager followed protocol, which, thanks to a little advanced planning with Mr. Langley, included a mandatory biometric scan and a silent alert sent directly to my phone and to Langley's office. And on the screen in front of them, right after their access was denied, was a message I'd asked to be programmed months ago. It said, "You really thought it would be that easy?" That's when things started unraveling faster than they could react. And that's exactly where things get interesting. The manager at Bellstone, a no-nonsense woman named Judith with icy silver hair and sharper eyes than a hawk, watched Evan and his lawyers squirm in silence after the message appeared. She didn't say anything. She didn't have to. The screen had locked, the fake documents had been flagged, and in a small glass-walled office just 20 feet away, 2 plainclothes security officers were already on their way. Evan, ever the fast talker, tried to salvage it. "There's clearly been a misunderstanding," he stammered, flashing a strained smile. "I'm just helping my cousin with some estate logistics. Family business, you know how messy that gets." Judith gave a slow, deliberate blink. Then she stood. "Mr. Caldwell, right?" she said, her voice polite but cold enough to fog a window. "I believe you've just committed attempted wire fraud and forged legal documentation. That's not messy. That's federal." Evan looked like someone had drained all the blood from his face. His lawyer, who I later learned was some sketchy consultant he found online, stood frozen, clutching his briefcase like it might somehow shield him from the fallout. Judith didn't shout. She just stepped aside as the security officers entered, calm and professional. Evan tried to argue, then to plead, then to leave, but the doors had been locked. I watched the footage later. Yes, I got a copy of him being let out of the bank, still sputtering about how this was all a big mistake, trying to spin a story to the officers like he was the victim of some elaborate scam. He called me that night. I didn't answer. Then he called my mom. She did what she always does, panicked, cried, and tried to guilt me into fixing everything. "Caleb, just talk to him. He made a mistake. He didn't mean to steal from you. You know how desperate he's been since his app flopped." His app, right. The one he raised money for on Kickstarter and spent mostly on marketing and networking trips to Ibiza. The same app that never launched because he couldn't find the right developer. Funny how that works. "I'm not fixing this," I told her. "And you shouldn't either. But he's your cousin. He tried to steal $1 million. There was a pause, then the sound of her sob catching in her throat. "You've changed, Caleb." I didn't respond. Because no, I hadn't changed. They were just finally seeing the part of me Aunt Margot had seen all along. The part that didn't let people walk all over me. Didn't let family excuse betrayal. Over the next week, things spiraled. Fast. Evan was released pending investigation, but the charges were very real. Bellstone's legal team wasn't about to let it slide, and Mr. Langley had filed a cease and desist against Evan's so-called estate review team within 24 hours. Turns out, Tampering with a deceased person's will is not just immoral, it's criminal. And in this case, it was being treated as attempted grand theft. My mom showed up at my door 3 days after the arrest. She looked tired. Her makeup was faded, her hair in a messy bun. She wasn't here to yell, for once. She just asked if we could talk. I let her in, made tea, sat across from her while she picked at a loose thread in her sleeve. I didn't know he'd go that far, she said finally. I did, I replied. She looked up, frowning. Why didn't you say something? Why didn't you warn me? Because the last time I tried to warn you, you said I was jealous of Evan, that I should be more like him. She winced. I didn't mean that. I was just, you've always been so quiet, Caleb. I didn't realize that I could take care of myself, I said, more sharply than I meant to. That maybe Margot left me the money because I never expected it, because I didn't ask for it. Silence. She looked away, blinking quickly. I'm sorry, she whispered. I really am. I didn't respond right away, because part of me wanted to forgive her, and another part, one that had been ignored, overlooked, and brushed off for years, wasn't ready. And then she said something that threw me off completely. Your aunt left you more than just the money, didn't she? I froze. What do you mean? She shook her head slowly, like she was still working it out in her mind. When she was dying, I visited once. Just once. She barely spoke. But as I was leaving, she said, he'll know what to do with it. He'll protect it. I thought she meant the money. But now I wonder. She reached into her purse and pulled out an old key, rusted at the edges, with a small purple tag that said, MH, third drawer. She told me to give this to you one day. Said you'd understand. I took it, heart racing. MH. Margot's house. The third drawer. I hadn't gone back since the funeral. I couldn't bring myself to. But now I had to. Because whatever was in that drawer, Margot meant for me to find it after all this. And something told me it wasn't just about money anymore. I barely slept that night. I must have turned the key over in my hands 100 times, trying to decode it like it was a puzzle. MH, third drawer. It was typical Margot, never one for grand gestures or long-winded letters. She believed in symbols, subtlety. She always said if something mattered, you'd feel it before you understood it. The next morning, I drove out to her house. She lived just outside the city in a brick one-story with ivy creeping along the side like nature was slowly hugging it to sleep. Everything about the place looked exactly as she left it. The wind chimes she'd hung from the porch still tinkled in the breeze. Her ceramic cat statues still lined the front windowsill like an odd little army. And the key fit perfectly into the back door lock, the one she always said, only the people who matter should use. I stepped inside. The air smelled faintly of lavender and cedar, with just a whisper of dust. I didn't turn on the lights. I didn't need to. The sunlight streamed through the lace curtains, just enough to guide me to the hallway, where she kept her old roll-top desk. That desk had been with her forever, since long before I was born. I remembered being a kid, sneaking peeks at it while she wrote checks or drafted letters in perfect cursive. The third drawer down on the right was always locked. She used to pat it and say, that one's for later. I guess later had finally come. I slipped the key into the lock. It clicked softly, like it had been waiting. I pulled the drawer open slowly. Inside was a leather folder, aged but well cared for. Beneath it, a flash drive in a labeled case. And under that, a photograph. It was of me, maybe 8 or 9 years old, sitting on the porch steps with Margot, both of us laughing at something just out of frame. On the back, in her looping handwriting, were the words, "You're the only one I ever trusted to see the whole board." I sat down in her old armchair, the folder resting on my knees, and opened it. Inside were bank statements, legal forms, and a single handwritten letter addressed to me. It started like this. If you're reading this, Evan did exactly what I expected him to do. I paused, letting the words settle. Margot hadn't just predicted it, she'd planned for it. She'd seen him coming from miles away, and she knew I'd need more than money to survive what was coming. She'd left behind documentation showing every transaction she made over the last 10 years. Purchases, investments, quiet loans she'd given out and never asked to be repaid. She'd even included a notarized statement about the updated will and the reason for the change, signed and witnessed long before her final days. But the real weight was on that flash drive. I slid it into my laptop. The folders were labeled meticulously. Insurance policy _ Evan loan forgiveness. Camden House _ transfer records. Recordings. It was the last one that made me stop breathing for a moment. I opened the recordings folder. There were 3 audio files, each time-stamped, each labeled with a date and the name, Evan. I clicked the first one. Margot's voice came through, soft but sharp, like a knife wrapped in velvet. "So, you're saying if I don't change the will back, you'll go to the press?" Then Evan's voice. Cocky. Familiar. "I'm saying this can all be easy, Andy. No drama. But come on. You and I both know Caleb won't know what to do with $1 million. Click. I shut the laptop. I sat there for a long time, hands shaking, staring at the screen. She had everything. Evidence of coercion, bribery, emotional manipulation. She hadn't just left me money. She'd left me the means to bury Evan if he ever tried to take it. But she hadn't done it herself. She'd left it to me, because she knew I'd wait until the exact right moment. And that moment was coming fast. Evan had crossed the line trying to drain the account. That alone was enough for legal action. But with the recordings and documents I now had, it wouldn't just be him going down. It could implicate his legal team, any bank employee who helped him, maybe even a few family members who signed off on forged documents thinking they'd never get caught. I packed everything back into the folder, locked the drawer again, and left the house without looking back. By the time I got home, there were 8 missed calls from Evan, 3 voicemails, all increasingly frantic. The last one, he was almost whispering, "Caleb, we need to talk. Seriously, you don't understand what you're doing. This isn't just about money anymore. Please, call me back. I think I messed up." I stared at the phone for a long time. Then I opened my laptop, dragged the audio files into an encrypted backup folder, and forwarded a copy to Mr. Langley with a short message. Activate the next step. Let them see what I've been holding. The next morning, everything started unraveling. I woke up to chaos. My phone was buzzing nonstop. Texts, calls, email alerts. Social media was lighting up too. My cousin Evan's name was trending locally, and not for anything good. Apparently, someone had leaked snippets of the recording from Margot's files to a small financial watchdog blog. It hadn't taken long for it to spread. The first clip? Evan smugly saying, "You and I both know Caleb won't know what to do with $1 million. The second? Margot asking coolly, "So you're threatening me?" It wasn't me who leaked it, by the way. I'd sent the recordings to Mr. Langley and asked him to handle it discreetly. He said, "Leave it to me." The man was like a chess grandmaster in a courtroom, quiet, calculated, and deadly with paperwork. By the time I finished my coffee, my cousin's world had begun to cave in. Apparently, his lawyer had panicked and turned on him immediately, offering up a statement to the police in exchange for immunity. Turns out, they'd used Margot's old letterhead, forged a signature from a scanned birthday card she'd once written, and claimed that she'd given Evan control of her accounts in her final days. Sloppy, arrogant, and completely traceable. Bellstone Bank had already flagged the entire incident. Their fraud department launched an internal investigation, and every bank Evan had ever worked with started quietly reviewing his past transactions. He had no idea just how deep the hole went. Later that afternoon, I got a call from a local reporter. She'd heard that I was the Caleb named in the inheritance dispute and asked if I had any comment. I declined politely. I didn't need to be part of the circus. But it confirmed what I'd suspected. This wasn't going to stay a private family issue. Evan had made it public when he tried to use a fake legal team and falsified documents to steal $1 million. The media just gave it a spotlight. My mom called again that night. "Caleb," she said. Her voice was trembling. "He's going to lose everything." The police came to his apartment. He called me crying. He said, "You've ruined him." I paused, then calmly replied, "I didn't ruin him, Mom. He did that to himself. I just stopped him from ruining me." She went quiet. For once, she didn't have a rebuttal. Just a soft, worn-out sigh. I could tell she was tired. Tired of the drama, tired of the consequences, tired of realizing her golden boy wasn't golden after all. "Do you hate us?" she asked after a long pause. That question caught me off guard. "No," I said. "I just finally stopped pretending you were protecting me when you weren't." There was another pause. "I didn't know," she whispered. "You didn't want to know," I corrected. And that was the last time we spoke for a while. A few weeks later, I received a formal letter from the state attorney's office. Evan had been formally charged with attempted fraud, forgery, and financial coercion. The DA wasn't playing around. They had everything: the forged documents, the recordings, even security footage from the bank. His plea deal involved house arrest, 5 years of probation, and mandatory restitution. But the real punishment wasn't legal. It was social. Evan's business contacts cut ties overnight. His app's startup investors, those few that hadn't already sued him, publicly announced their disassociation. He went from acting like a tech entrepreneur to selling his watch collection just to pay his attorney. His name was toxic. His reputation obliterated. Meanwhile, I sat quietly at the center of the storm. I didn't flaunt my victory. I didn't post vague status updates or passive-aggressive tweets. I just kept doing what I'd always done, working quietly, watching closely. I moved into a new apartment, modest but mine. I invested part of the money into a scholarship fund under Margot's name, specifically for students in underserved areas who wanted to study computer science. The rest I left untouched. I had no plans to blow through it. Margot didn't leave me that money so I could become someone else. She left it so I could stay who I was, without needing to beg for permission. About 3 months later, I returned to her house one last time. It had been cleaned, maintained, but untouched. Mr. Langley helped me transfer ownership smoothly. She'd left everything to me, including the house, her personal journals, and all the family photos she kept hidden from the rest of them. I walked through each room slowly, feeling the weight of her presence still clinging to the corners. In the living room, tucked behind a row of dusty mystery novels, I found a small, sealed envelope. On the front, in her handwriting, was just one word, if. I opened it. Caleb, if you're reading this, then you did what I expected, but not what I hoped. I hoped Evan would prove me wrong. I hoped your mother would finally see you for who you are. But if they didn't, I knew you'd be ready. You always saw the board. You always played the long game. You were never loud, but you were always listening. Don't let this make you cold. Don't let them turn you bitter. Keep your hands clean and your heart soft. And if you ever wonder why I left it all to you, it's because you were the only one who never asked. Love, Margot. I sat on the floor and cried. Not out of relief, not out of pride, but because I missed her. Because even after everything, all the drama and betrayal and revenge, I would have traded it all for one more quiet evening on her porch, sipping tea and watching the sun go down. In the end, I didn't destroy my cousin. He destroyed himself. All I did was hold up the mirror. And finally, he had to look. As for the rest of my family, they stayed distant. A few half-hearted texts over holidays, maybe a birthday message from my aunt asking how I was doing with all that money. But it never felt real. It never felt honest. And I was okay with that. Because for the first time in my life, I had something they couldn't touch: peace. And no amount of inheritance, manipulation, or fake smiles could ever buy that. My name's Jake. I'm 30 years old, and I used to think my family was, well, not perfect, but normal enough. We weren't the kind to scream across the dinner table or throw plates. My mom always made sure every Thanksgiving looked like one of those magazine spreads: golden turkey, candles, the whole warm and fuzzy vibe. But the older I got, the more I realized that what looked perfect from the outside was just a cover for something cold and rotting underneath. You ever walk into a family gathering and instantly feel like you don't belong? That was me every single year. Except this year, it hit different. Because this time, they didn't even try to hide it. I pulled into the driveway at 3:58 p.m. sharp, same as always. My mom hated when anyone was late. Dinner's at 4, not whenever you feel like it o'clock, she'd joke every year. I parked behind my sister Megan's car, brand new Lexus SUV, the one she'd posted about on Facebook with the caption, "Hard work pays off." What she didn't mention, of course, was that Mom had co-signed the loan and helped with the down payment. I walked up the front steps with a pumpkin pie I'd baked the night before, still warm, still smelling like cinnamon and vanilla. I'd been looking forward to this Thanksgiving, not because I loved the company, but because I thought maybe this year things would be different. Maybe Mom and I would actually talk. Maybe Megan wouldn't act like I was invisible. Maybe Uncle Rob wouldn't bring up the job thing. I should have known better. The front door opened before I even knocked. Uncle Rob stood there, beer in hand, his usual smirk plastered across his face. "Well, look who decided to show up," he said, leaning on the doorframe. "Didn't think you'd have the guts after last year." I blinked. "Hi to you too, Rob. What's that supposed to mean?" He took a slow sip of his drink and said, almost casually, "Mom didn't tell you? You're not welcome here this time." He let the words hang in the air like a bad smell. For a moment, I thought he was joking. He always liked to push buttons, and I wasn't about to give him the reaction he wanted. But then I saw my mom in the hallway behind him, her expression unreadable. She didn't step forward. She didn't say a word. She just gave this tiny, almost nervous laugh, like she'd been caught in something, and said, "Oh, Rob, stop. Don't be so dramatic. Let him in." But her tone wasn't the usual warm one. It was thin, sharp, controlled. The kind of voice people use when they're trying to manage a situation without losing face. I stepped inside anyway, setting the pie on the counter in the kitchen. The air smelled like roasted turkey and tension. Megan was by the table, adjusting the silverware, humming to herself. She barely looked up when I walked in. "You brought pie?" she asked, like I'd shown up with a bucket of dirt. "We already have two. Mom made one, and Ryan brought one too." Ryan, her boyfriend, or as Mom liked to call him, the son I never had. I bit back a sigh. "Guess you'll have plenty of dessert then," I said, trying to keep my tone light. I've been working on keeping things calm this year. No arguments. No letting anyone drag me into the usual games. But the second Ryan walked in from the living room, wearing a sweater that looked like it cost more than my month's rent, I knew it was going to be a long night. He grinned like he owned the place. "Jake, my man," he said, patting me on the back. "Still at that warehouse job?" He didn't even wait for an answer before continuing. "Gotta admire that consistency. Loyalty, right?" I smiled tightly. "Yeah, something like that." He laughed, oblivious, or maybe not. "Well, everyone's got to start somewhere." Megan giggled. Mom pretended to adjust the oven timer. Uncle Rob chuckled into his drink. It was like a synchronized performance, one I'd seen too many times before. I sat down at the corner of the table, the spot I'd always taken since I was a kid. It was a small thing, but it was my spot, between the window and the cabinet, right where I could see outside if things got too loud. But before I could pull the chair out, Mom said, without even looking up, "Oh, honey, I actually moved the seating around this year." I froze mid-step. "What do you mean?" She smiled, the kind of smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Well, Ryan's joining us, so I thought it made sense for him to sit there. You can take the chair by the hallway. The one half a meter from the kitchen door. The one nobody ever sat in because it was too close to the traffic." I hesitated, trying to swallow the sting. "Sure," I said finally, forcing a laugh. "Guess I've been demoted." Ryan laughed again, loudly, too loudly, and pulled the chair out like he was settling into a throne. I sat down at the new spot, feeling the weight of the shift. Every detail screamed that I didn't belong. Megan and Ryan chatted about some vacation they'd taken. Mom asked questions, smiling and nodding. Uncle Rob threw in jokes. And me? I sat quietly, cutting small pieces of turkey, pretending to enjoy myself while my chest tightened. The thing is, I wasn't angry yet. I was just tired. Tired of being the extra piece, the spare part. Every year it was something small, a forgotten birthday, a casual dig, a joke that went too far. And I always let it go because that's what you do with family, right? You let it go. You tell yourself they don't mean it. But sitting there, listening to Ryan brag about closing deals while my mom hung on every word, something in me started to shift. I caught myself glancing at my phone, at the message I'd drafted weeks ago but never sent. It was a simple text, just a few lines, but it had the power to change everything. I'd written it after something that happened last spring, something none of them knew about. Something that, if I sent it, would make the cracks in this family impossible to ignore. But not yet. I kept my phone face down and tried to focus on the sound of forks and plates, the clinking of glasses. For a while, it almost felt normal again, until Mom leaned back and said, in that too casual tone she used when she wanted to twist the knife, "So, Jake, any news about that promotion you didn't get?" My fork paused halfway to my mouth. The room went quiet for half a beat, then Megan snickered. "Mom," she said, pretending to scold her, "be nice." But her eyes were gleaming. Ryan smirked. Uncle Rob muttered, "Guess hard work doesn't always pay off." I set my fork down slowly, my pulse rising. "Nope," I said, my voice steady. "Didn't get it. But it's fine." Mom gave that tight smile again. "Oh, honey, don't say that. You should really be aiming higher, you know? You're too smart to waste your time there. Maybe talk to Ryan. He knows people." It wasn't the words. It was the tone. The pitying, condescending tone that made it sound like I'd failed some unspoken family test. I looked at her for a long second, waiting to see if there was any trace of the mom I remembered. The one who used to bring me soup when I was sick. The one who cheered the loudest at my high school graduation. But she just turned away, asking Megan to pass the cranberry sauce. That was the moment I realized something had broken a long time ago. I'd just been pretending it hadn't. The rest of dinner passed in a blur. Laughter that didn't include me. Stories I wasn't a part of. I helped clear the dishes afterward, mostly out of habit. As I was setting the last plate down, I heard Uncle Rob call from the living room. "Hey Jake, you heading out already? Don't forget your pie. No one touched it." I turned around. He was grinning. My mom was standing beside him, arms crossed, not saying a word. That's when the silence between us finally snapped. Not out loud, yet, but inside me. I looked at my phone again, the unsent message glowing faintly on the screen. And for the first time, I didn't just think about sending it. I wanted to. But before I could decide, my mom said softly, "Jake, don't make this a scene, okay?" And that was it. That one sentence. The casual dismissal. The warning, like I was some ticking bomb she had to manage. I nodded, grabbed my jacket, and walked toward the door. My uncle stepped aside just enough to make it clear I was being let out, not seen off. The cold air hit me as I stepped outside, but it felt better than the air in that house. I sat in my car for a long minute, hands on the steering wheel, heart pounding. I stared at the message again, thumb hovering over the send button. And that's when I saw something on my mom's phone through the living room window. She'd picked it up, smiling at whatever Ryan was showing her. My pie still sat on the counter, untouched. My seat taken. My place erased. I hit send. When I pulled out of Mom's driveway, my hands were shaking. Not from anger, at least not at first. It was that kind of hollow, quiet exhaustion that comes when you realize the people who are supposed to love you unconditionally just don't. The text I'd sent was still glowing on my phone screen, those gray check marks sitting there like tiny promises. I didn't know what would happen next, but for once, I didn't care. I'd been silent long enough. It took 20 minutes for my phone to buzz. One message, then another, then a call, then another. By the time I got home, my screen was lit up with a dozen missed calls from family members, half from numbers I hadn't seen in months. I didn't answer any of them. I put the phone face down on the counter, poured myself a glass of water, and sat there listening to the refrigerator hum. The message I'd sent wasn't long, just a few sentences, but it said everything they'd spent years pretending not to hear. "Mom, I know what you did with Grandpa's money. I know about the transfer, and I know Megan knows too. You might want to tell everyone before I do." I hadn't planned to send it today. I'd written it months ago, after finding out something I wasn't supposed to know. Grandpa had left a small inheritance when he passed. A few $1,000s to each grandchild, supposedly. But when I went to check with the attorney handling his estate, he told me my portion had already been claimed. By Mom. With Megan's signature on the same form. They'd taken it, mine, and probably others. When I confronted Mom about it back then, she said it was a clerical mistake and promised to fix it. Then weeks passed. Then months. And suddenly, I was the problem for bringing it up. So yeah, when Uncle Rob told me I wasn't welcome and Mom gave my seat to her favorite daughter's boyfriend, that was it. That was the moment I realized they were never going to make it right unless I forced it. I sat in the dark for a while, replaying the dinner in my head. Mom's fake smile, Megan's smugness, Ryan's jokes. I told myself I wasn't angry. But anger has a way of sneaking up on you. By the time I went to bed, my heart was pounding. The next morning, my phone rang again. It was Megan. I almost ignored it, but curiosity got the better of me. I answered. "Jake, what did you do?" Her voice was sharp, defensive. "I sent a message," I said flatly. "To Mom? During dinner? You seriously couldn't wait? Why wait? You both have been lying to everyone for months. You don't know what you're talking about." "Oh, I do," I said quietly. "The attorney told me everything. The date, the amount, the signatures. Yours and hers." There was a pause on the line. Then, "You're pathetic, you know that? Grandpa wanted Mom to handle it. You wouldn't even know what to do with the money." I almost laughed. "Right, because you and Ryan really needed that new Lexus." Her silence was louder than any insult. Then she said, "You've always been jealous. You can't stand that I'm actually successful. Mom helps me because I earn it. By stealing. By being worth helping," she snapped. "You wouldn't understand that." And then she hung up. I sat there for a long time, staring at the dead call screen, my coffee going cold. The worst part wasn't even what she said. It was how easily she said it. Like she'd been waiting for the chance. By noon, I started getting texts from cousins. One said, "Dude, what's going on? Your mom's crying." Another said, "You really sent that message at dinner? Bold move." And then one from my aunt, Uncle Rob's wife, "You did the right thing." Finally, that last one caught me off guard. Apparently, it hadn't taken long for the chaos to spread. Aunt Karen told me later that after I left, Mom tried to act normal, but Uncle Rob had seen the message flash across her phone. He asked her about it in front of everyone. When she refused to answer, he pressed harder. Then the arguing started. Half the table sided with her, half didn't. Someone brought up how she'd handled Grandpa's estate, and all the whispers turned into shouting. By the time dessert was supposed to be served, people were grabbing coats and walking out. So yeah, I hadn't planned on ruining Thanksgiving. But apparently, that's what I did. The next few days were a blur of silence and guilt, and, honestly, relief. I didn't go to work that Friday. I couldn't. I kept thinking about Grandpa, how he used to tell me, "Jake, you can't pick your family, but you can decide how much power they get over you." I never really understood that until now. On Saturday morning, there was a knock on my door. I looked through the peephole and felt my stomach drop. Mom. She looked tired. Her hair was messy, and her eyes were red. For a second, I almost felt sorry for her. Then she spoke. "Can I come in?" she asked softly. I hesitated, then stepped aside. She walked in slowly, glancing around my small apartment like she was stepping into foreign territory. "Jake," she started, "I don't know what you think you know, but I know enough," I interrupted. She sighed. "You've always been so quick to assume the worst." I didn't steal anything. I just moved things around. Megan needed help with her loan, and it was temporary. You know I was going to make it right. Then why didn't you? Her lips pressed together. "Because I thought you'd understand." "Understand what? That you chose her over me?" "Again, don't make it sound like that," she said sharply. "You're fine. You don't need as much as she does." It was like hearing my childhood condensed into one sentence. I laughed, an ugly, humorless sound. "You've been saying that my whole life. When you gave her my bike for Christmas. When you paid her rent but told me to be independent. When you let her take credit for the business idea I came up with. Every time, you said, 'Jake doesn't need it.' But you know what, Mom? I did. I needed fairness. I needed respect." She looked stunned, like she hadn't expected me to push back. "You're being dramatic." "Am I? You literally told me I wasn't welcome in my own family's house." "That was Rob. He was drinking. You know how he gets." "You didn't stop him." Her mouth opened, then closed. She turned away. "You're just trying to make me feel guilty," she said quietly. "Well, it's working. Congratulations." And then, like she couldn't stand another second of silence, she said, "You need to delete that message. Now, before it spreads any further." I almost couldn't believe what I was hearing. "You came here to clean up the mess, not to apologize." "This isn't about cleaning up, it's about family," she snapped, her voice cracking. "You're tearing us apart." I stared at her for a long time. "No, Mom. You did that when you decided fairness was optional." She stood there trembling, then muttered, "I should have known you'd turn into your father." And with that, she grabbed her purse and stormed out. The door slammed so hard that one of my picture frames rattled off the wall. I didn't pick it up. That night, I got another call, this time from my cousin Sam. He was the quiet one in the family, the one who stayed out of drama. "Hey," he said, "just so you know, everyone's talking about what happened. Apparently, Uncle Rob's threatening to tell the rest of the family about the inheritance thing. Mom says he's furious." "Good," I said, maybe too quickly. "Jake, what did you send exactly?" I told him, word for word. There was a pause, then a low whistle. "Damn," he said, "that's gonna blow up big time." It already had. By Sunday, Megan posted something on Facebook, one of those vague, passive-aggressive statuses that everyone knows is about someone specific. Some people just can't handle seeing others succeed. Jealousy is a disease. Get well soon. The comments were full of sympathy from her friends. Mom even left a heart emoji. I didn't comment. I didn't need to. But as the weekend went on, the guilt started to mix with something else, curiosity. If half the family had walked out, that meant the truth was finally spreading. Maybe this was my chance to set everything straight. I started digging. Old emails, bank statements, the estate paperwork. The more I found, the worse it looked. It wasn't just my share. Mom had quietly redirected funds from multiple accounts, some belonging to cousins, one even under Grandpa's old veteran's benefit. And she'd been doing it for years. That's when I realized this wasn't about a few $1,000s anymore. It was about a pattern, a system. She'd built her whole sense of control around the idea that no one would ever question her. Until now. By Monday, the family chat was on fire. Accusations, defenses, screenshots. People were choosing sides. Some still defended her. She's done so much for everyone. Stop attacking her. Others wanted answers. And through it all, Mom stayed silent. Until that evening. She called again. This time, I let it go to voicemail. Her voice was shaky but controlled. Jake, you've made your point. You've embarrassed me enough. But if you think I'm going to let you destroy this family, you're wrong. You have no idea what you've started. I played the message twice. Then 3 times. Because she was right. I really didn't know what I'd started. And the next day, I'd find out just how far she'd go to protect her lies. The next few weeks felt like someone had pressed pause on my life and forgot to hit play again. My phone became this constant reminder of everything that had exploded. Unread messages, half-hearted apologies, and plenty of accusations. I stopped answering after a while. Every ping made my chest tighten, so I turned off notifications altogether. Silence felt safer. At first, I thought I'd feel vindicated. I'd told the truth, right? I'd finally stood up for myself after years of being dismissed. But the reality of it hit harder than I expected. Family doesn't just disappear quietly. It collapses in slow motion, and you feel every crack. I started noticing little things. My aunt stopped liking my posts online. My cousin stopped inviting me to game nights. Even people who'd once told me they understood began keeping their distance. Nobody wanted to pick sides, so they just picked silence. And silence, when you're already alone, feels like a verdict. Work wasn't much better. I was distracted, constantly checking my phone, waiting for the next blow. My manager, Eric, pulled me aside one day and said, "Jake, you're off your game. You okay, man?" Yeah, I lied. He didn't push. Just gave me that look. The kind people give when they know you're not fine, but also know they can't fix it. Then the rumors started spreading beyond family. Somehow, word of the Thanksgiving incident leaked out to my extended relatives. People I hadn't seen in years started calling, asking what had happened. Some wanted gossip. Others wanted to lecture me about forgiveness. But none of them knew the whole story. None of them knew what it was like growing up constantly second to Megan. How every success I had was quietly minimized, while every stumble was turned into a talking point. How Mom had always justified it. She's younger, Jake, she needs more support. But support turned into favoritism, and favoritism turned into betrayal. I remember sitting at my kitchen table one night, scrolling through old family photos on my laptop. There was one of me and Megan at Christmas, maybe 15 years ago. She was unwrapping a shiny new phone, the latest model at the time. I had a pair of gloves. Mom's caption under the picture read, "Jake being such a good big brother." I stared at it for a long time, realizing that caption was the whole story. Me, expected to be good, patient, understanding, while everyone else took. For a while, I stopped visiting social media entirely. I'd go to work, come home, heat up leftovers, and stare at my walls. There was a dullness to everything, like color had drained out of my days. I didn't even bake anymore, not since the pie incident. That felt symbolic in a way I couldn't quite explain. Then, one morning, I got a call from Aunt Karen, the same one who'd texted me, saying I did the right thing. Her voice was cautious but kind. "Jake, honey, I just wanted to check in. I know things are messy, but I'm proud of you. You told the truth, and that matters." It was the first kind thing anyone in my family had said to me in weeks. She went on, telling me how Uncle Rob had been digging into the financial mess. Turns out I'd barely scratched the surface. Mom had been using Grandpa's estate funds for years to support Megan, covering loans, paying off credit cards, even investing in some online boutique she'd started. And when that business tanked, Mom had quietly paid off the losses with what was supposed to be family money. Hearing that didn't make me feel better. It made me feel worse. Because I realized I'd been right, but being right didn't fix anything. It just left ashes. For a while, I tried to focus on rebuilding routine. I started jogging again. At first, it was pathetic. I couldn't even make it around the block without gasping. But there was something grounding about the rhythm, the air, the burn in my lungs. It was the first thing in weeks that made me feel in control. After work, I started taking online courses. Not for a degree, not yet, just random ones. A marketing course, a basic accounting one, A creative writing workshop, because I'd always liked stories but never had the confidence to try writing one myself. I didn't tell anyone. It felt private, sacred almost. Something that was just mine. Around that time, Eric at work offered me a chance to shadow a logistics coordinator. "You've got a good eye for detail," he said. "You should consider moving up." For the first time in a long time, I said yes to something without second-guessing. The days turned into weeks, and I started to feel a quiet steadiness forming where the chaos had been. My apartment didn't feel empty anymore. It felt peaceful. I'd light a candle at night, make tea, and just sit. There's a strange kind of healing that comes from solitude, but only when you stop seeing it as punishment. Then, one night, as I was wrapping up an online class, I got an email from Megan. The subject line was just, "We need to talk." I almost deleted it without opening, but curiosity won. She wrote, "Jake, I don't know how much you've heard, but Mom's not doing well. She's been calling around trying to fix things, but people aren't answering. Aunt Karen won't speak to her. Uncle Rob told everyone about the accounts. Ryan's been avoiding the family group chat. She's falling apart, Jake. Please, don't let this get worse." No apology. No acknowledgement. Just a plea to protect the person who broke everything. I didn't respond. Not because I didn't care, but because I finally realized I wasn't responsible for holding this family together anymore. A week later, Aunt Karen invited me over for coffee. It felt strange walking into her house after everything. Same floral curtains, same smell of cinnamon, same family photos lining the wall. Except one frame was missing. A big one, the Thanksgiving photo from a few years back. The one where everyone was smiling like nothing was wrong. She noticed me staring. "I took it down," she said simply. "Didn't feel right keeping lies on display." We sat at the kitchen table, and she told me how the family was splitting into two camps. Some were furious at Mom. Others were blaming me. And a few, surprisingly, were thanking me privately for finally saying what everyone had suspected. Then she said something I didn't expect. "Jake, your grandpa left something else. Not money, a letter. I found it in one of his boxes when we were cleaning out storage." She handed me a folded, yellowed envelope. My name written on the front in Grandpa's careful handwriting. My hands trembled as I opened it. Inside was a short note. "Jake, families get lost sometimes. Don't waste your life trying to find people who don't want to be found. Build your own peace. That's how you win." Grandpa, I don't know how long I sat there, staring at that letter, but something in me shifted again. Not the sharp, angry kind of shift this time, but something calmer. Like my shoulders had been carrying a weight I hadn't realized was optional. When I got home that night, I framed the letter. It sits on my desk now, right next to my laptop. Every time I start doubting myself, I read it again. The funny thing about hitting rock bottom is that you stop fearing the fall. Once you've seen everything crumble, you stop trying to control what's out of your hands. You start focusing on what's left, and sometimes, what's left is enough. By late February, things at work had picked up. I was officially training for the coordinator position. My pay wasn't huge, but it was stable. I even started saving a little again. And in that small, growing sense of independence, I found a new kind of confidence. One that didn't need validation from anyone named family. Then, just as things were settling, I got a text from an unknown number one evening. "Hey Jake, it's Ryan. Can we talk?" I stared at it for a long time. The same guy who'd laughed about my job, who'd sat in my seat at Thanksgiving like it belonged to him. He wanted to talk now? I didn't respond right away, but curiosity, and maybe a faint flicker of unfinished anger, kept me from deleting it. The next day, another message came. "It's about your mom. She did something, man. You need to see this." And just like that, all the quiet peace I'd been building cracked a little. Because no matter how far I'd come, there was still one thing I hadn't faced, the storm that was still brewing inside that family. I didn't know it then, but what Ryan was about to tell me would make Thanksgiving look like a warm-up. And this time, I wouldn't be the one losing everything. When I finally agreed to meet Ryan, I told myself it wasn't about revenge. It was about clarity, about tying up the last loose thread so I could move on. But the truth is, somewhere deep down, I already knew this was the start of something else, something bigger. We met at a small cafe on the edge of town, the kind of quiet place where nobody knows you and nobody asks questions. Ryan was already there when I arrived, sitting in a corner booth with a coffee he hadn't touched. He looked different, not polished and confident like he'd been at Thanksgiving, more like someone who hadn't slept in days. When he saw me, He gave this small, nervous smile. "Hey, Jake. Thanks for coming." I slid into the booth across from him. "You said you had something to show me." He nodded and pulled out his phone, swiping through a few photos before handing it over. What I saw made my stomach drop. Screenshots, bank statements, transfers, all from Mom's accounts. Only this time, the transactions weren't just about Grandpa's inheritance. There were more recent ones, large amounts of money being moved around under a different name. I scrolled, reading each line carefully, the numbers blurring together. "What am I looking at?" I asked quietly. "She's been doing this for months," Ryan said. "After you sent that message, she panicked. Started moving money from Megan's business accounts into her own. Told her it was temporary." I looked up. "And you're telling me this because?" "Because Megan doesn't know yet," he said, lowering his voice. "And when she finds out, it's gonna blow up even worse than before." I leaned back in my chair, letting out a long breath. "Why are you even involved? Last I checked, you were pretty comfortable in all this." He ran a hand through his hair. "I was. But your mom, she crossed a line. She took money from one of my investments too. Said she'd pay it back once things settled, but now the bank's asking questions. I can't afford to go down with her. So now you want my help." Ryan nodded slowly. "Look, I get it. I was a jerk. You don't owe me anything. But you've got proof. People already believe you. If you expose her again, this time with everything, the whole story comes out. Every transfer, every lie. No one can cover for her anymore." I studied him for a moment, trying to decide if this was genuine or just another move in some power game. But then he said something that stuck. "She's not scared of me, Jake. She's scared of you. Because you're the only one who ever called her out." For a long moment, I didn't say anything. I just sat there, watching the light reflect off my coffee cup. That same quiet part of me that had spent years swallowing pride and pain was whispering, "Let it go. Just move on." But another voice, the one I tried to bury, whispered louder, "No, not this time." I looked back at Ryan. "Send me everything you've got." He blinked. "You're serious?" "Dead serious." That night, my inbox filled with files, bank statements, emails, even voice memos Mom had sent Megan where she casually mentioned borrowing money. I downloaded everything and backed it up twice. Then I spent the next few hours organizing it all. Dates, amounts, recipients. A paper trail so clear it could make a lawyer salivate. As I worked, something strange happened. The anger that had been simmering for months turned into focus. For the first time in a long while, I wasn't just reacting, I was planning. Over the next week, I reached out quietly to the people who'd walked out of Thanksgiving. Aunt Karen, Cousin Sam, even Uncle Rob. I told them I had proof, not rumors, not accusations, but hard evidence. They didn't hesitate. "Whatever you need," Karen said. "She's been manipulating us for years." Sam offered to help me organize everything legally. Rob said he had contacts in the local paper, a columnist who covered community scandals and financial fraud. At first, I wasn't sure if I wanted to go that far. It felt too public, too final. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized something. My mom had built her entire identity around reputation. To her, image was reality. The perfect family, the generous mother, the moral compass. Take that away, and the whole structure collapsed. And maybe that's what she needed, to see what it felt like to lose control. Still, I wanted to do it right. No chaos, no yelling. Just truth, stripped bare. So I started laying the groundwork. I drafted a timeline of events, backed it with receipts and bank logs. Sam helped me organize it into a folder, one for the lawyer, one for the reporter, one for the family. Then I wrote a statement. Simple, factual, but impossible to misinterpret. I spent hours fine-tuning every line. No emotion, no blame, just facts. Over the last 2 years, significant funds from the family estate and related business accounts have been redirected without authorization. Attached are records of the transactions. All evidence has been verified. The truth deserves to be known. When I finally finished, I sat back in my chair, staring at the screen. My hand hovered over the mouse. Part of me hesitated, not because I doubted what I was doing, but because I knew once this went out, there'd be no undoing it. And then I thought about Thanksgiving, about Uncle Rob blocking the doorway, about my mom laughing softly as she gave my seat away, about the way she'd looked at me, not with disappointment, but with contempt. That memory burned away any hesitation left. I hit save, but I didn't send it yet. Timing mattered. If I was going to do this, it had to hit when she least expected it, and when she couldn't twist it into another narrative. So I waited. Meanwhile, I kept my distance. Ryan texted occasionally with updates. Apparently, Megan had started noticing missing funds and was asking questions. Mom had brushed it off as confusion, but the tension was building. It was only a matter of time before something snapped. A few days later, I got an invitation, a family dinner at Megan's house, supposedly to talk things through. A setup. I knew it the second I saw the message. But instead of declining, I said yes. That night, I stood in front of my mirror, buttoning my shirt with slow, deliberate calm. I didn't feel nervous. I felt ready. When I arrived, everyone was already there. Mom, Megan, even Uncle Rob. The air was thick with forced politeness. Mom smiled the way people do when they're trying to keep from screaming. "Jake," she said, standing to greet me. "Thank you for coming." I gave a small nod. Didn't want to miss the show. Her smile faltered for half a second before she gestured toward a seat. "Let's talk as a family." I sat, watching her carefully. Megan looked uneasy, like she knew something was coming but didn't know what. Ryan avoided my eyes. Mom cleared her throat. "I've been told you've been collecting information. False information, I might add." "Nothing false," I said. "Just facts." "Jake, you don't understand how these things work," she said smoothly. "Families handle things privately. Going around spreading accusations only hurts everyone." "Funny," I said. "You weren't worried about privacy when you forged my signature." Her face twitched, the mask slipping for just a second. "That was an oversight." "No," I said quietly. "That was theft." The room went still. Megan's fork froze halfway to her mouth. Ryan stared at his plate. Mom leaned forward, her voice icy. "You think you're some kind of hero, don't you? You have no idea what I've done for this family." I met her gaze. "No, Mom. You have no idea what I'm about to do." And as her expression hardened, I realized this was it. The moment everything would tip. Because sitting there, across from the woman who'd made me feel small my entire life, I finally saw her for what she was. Not powerful, not untouchable, just desperate. And she had no idea what was coming next. I smiled slightly, leaned back in my chair, and said, "You'll find out soon enough." Then I stood, grabbed my coat, and walked out, leaving her frozen in that perfect picture of control she'd spent her whole life curating. The next morning, I opened my laptop, took a deep breath, and hovered over the folder labeled "The Truth." And just before I hit send, my phone buzzed with a message from Ryan. "She's panicking. She knows you have everything. Do it now." So I did. And by the time the sun set, the first ripple had already started spreading. One email, sent to everyone who'd ever believed her. The truth was finally on its way. The fallout began quietly. It was almost anticlimactic at first. No explosion, no screaming. Just the faint digital hum of an email traveling across the internet, landing in inboxes all at once. I sent it to every relative who had ever pretended not to see what was happening. Aunts, uncles, cousins, even a few old family friends who'd always called my mom an inspiration. Within an hour, my phone started buzzing. By the third hour, it wouldn't stop. I didn't answer any calls. I just sat there in my apartment, watching the chaos unfold in real time. The group chat exploded, messages pouring in so fast I could barely read them before another wave hit. "Is this real? Tell me this isn't true. Oh my God, she forged signatures?" And then the texts started coming from her. "MOM, Jake, what have you done?" "MOM, you don't understand what you've unleashed." "MOM, please, take it down. We can fix this." But there was no fixing it. The files spoke for themselves. The first ripple hit when Uncle Rob called me. "She's losing it, Jake. Denying everything. Megan's furious. Apparently half her business account is gone. Ryan's confirming all of it. I don't know what you started, but she's done." I didn't reply right away. I just listened to him breathe on the other end, his tone somewhere between shock and grim satisfaction. "Done how?" I finally asked. "She's finished," he said. "Everyone knows. Karen's already sent the documents to the rest of the family. Even the ones who defended her are backing away. It's over." But it wasn't over, not yet. 2 days later, my mom's perfect world began to crack in public. The local columnist, the one Uncle Rob had mentioned, picked up the story. The headline was short, almost surgical. "Local woman accused of mismanaging family estate funds." They didn't use our last name, but everyone knew. Small towns have a way of connecting the dots faster than any journalist can. Within 24 hours, her social media accounts vanished. Megan's boutique page, the one Mom had secretly funded, went dark. And then, like the final domino, Mom's job at the local community foundation was temporarily suspended pending review. I found out through a mutual acquaintance that the board had discovered irregularities in donation records. Apparently, she'd used her position to funnel money into side projects for Megan. She thought she was untouchable. But once the truth started surfacing, it all came apart. Neat, orderly, and irreversible. It was strange, watching it unfold from the sidelines. I didn't feel triumphant exactly. More like quiet relief. For years, she'd controlled the narrative. Every argument ended with her winning. Every confrontation ended with me apologizing. But this time, there was nothing she could twist. The truth didn't care about her charm. One evening, about a week after everything went public, there was a knock on my door. I knew it was her before I even looked through the peephole. She stood there in a long gray coat, her hair disheveled, her eyes tired. For the first time in my life, she looked small. Not the commanding, composed woman I'd grown up fearing, just a person, fragile and lost. "Can I come in?" she asked softly. I didn't answer right away. Then I opened the door and stepped aside. She walked in slowly, her eyes darting around the apartment like she was seeing a stranger's life. "You've been busy," she murmured, glancing at the framed letter from Grandpa on my desk. I folded my arms. "You've lost everything, haven't you?" She flinched. "You think this makes you better than me?" "No," I said. "It just means I finally stopped letting you take from me." She sighed, sinking onto the edge of the couch. "You don't understand, Jake. I did what I had to do. You've never had a family to take care of." "I had this family," I said quietly. "And look how that turned out." For a long time, she didn't speak. The clock ticked in the background, steady and indifferent. Then she said, "They're all turning on me. Even Megan. She says she wants nothing to do with me." "She's probably scared," I said. "But now she knows what it feels like." Her lips trembled slightly. "I never meant for it to go this far." "That's the thing about lying," I said. "It always goes further than you think." She looked up at me then, really looked. "You're proud of this, aren't you? Destroying your own mother." I met her gaze. "No, I'm proud I finally told the truth." She stood slowly, straightening her coat. "You'll regret this one day. Families always find ways to forgive." "Maybe," I said, "but not this one." And then I opened the door. She hesitated, like she wanted to say more, but instead she stepped outside. "Goodbye, Mom." She turned her head slightly, then walked down the hall without another word. That was the last time I saw her. The weeks that followed were surreal. My name started popping up in whispered conversations. Some people called me brave, others said I'd gone too far. Megan sent one message a few days later. "I don't know whether to hate you or thank you." I didn't reply. Some things don't need responses. Ryan, surprisingly, ended up helping me more than I expected. He testified when the foundation's auditors came asking questions, confirming every detail about the financial transfers. I didn't need to lift a finger after that. The system did the rest. Mom was quietly removed from her position. Megan's boutique shut down within the month. The family, once so carefully held together by appearances, fractured for good. But unlike before, I didn't feel like the outcast. I felt free. I took a few weeks off work after that. Used the time to get out of town, drive along the coast, clear my head. Somewhere along that drive, I realized how different everything felt. No more waiting for someone to validate me. No more measuring my worth through her approval. One morning, I stopped at a diner off Highway 23. The waitress brought me coffee, and as I stared out at the ocean, I caught myself smiling. Not a big grin, just a quiet, content kind of smile. The kind that sneaks up on you when you realize you've survived something that was supposed to break you. When I got back home, I opened the box that held old family photos, birthdays, Christmases, vacations. For the first time, I didn't feel that old ache of wanting to belong. I felt distance. Perspective. I took out one picture. Me, Grandpa, and Megan, back when we were kids, sitting on the porch with melting popsicles. He was laughing in that deep, warm way he used to. I put the photo next to his letter on my desk. They belonged together. A few months later, Aunt Karen invited me to Easter dinner. "We're keeping it small," she said. "Just the ones who actually like each other." That made me laugh. It was the first real laugh in a long time. When I walked into her house that day, There was no tension, no forced smiles, just family, the kind that stayed after everything else fell apart. As dinner ended, Karen raised her glass and said, "To new beginnings." And for once, I didn't feel like I was pretending to be part of something. I was part of it. After dinner, I stepped outside for some air. The evening light was soft, and the air smelled like spring rain. My phone buzzed, a new email notification. It was from the lawyer handling Grandpa's estate. The subject line read, "Final distribution notice." I opened it. Turns out, the court had finally cleared the inheritance accounts after months of legal mess. My portion, the one Mom had stolen years ago, had been recovered in full. It wasn't a fortune, just enough to start over. But that wasn't what made me smile. What made me smile was knowing that the cycle had finally ended. The taking, the lying, the pretending. I closed the email, took a deep breath, and looked out at the fading sunset. For the first time in my life, I wasn't chasing peace. I had it, and that was worth more than anything she ever took.